Hi, Janet.
Hi.
Hi, Lois. Oh, you're muted.
Hi, Rachel.
I'm now unmuted. Hello, everybody. How are you?
Hi.
You hear me now, right?
Yes.
Well, good to see you all again. We had 1 month break, and here we are again. Missed each other in August. Oh, hi, Matt. I see you've been elevated. I'm Matt Lorenz. That's Matt Lorenz.
Hi, Shirley.
Who's going to be giving the first presentation of the day. Now, I guess we're going to wait a little bit because it doesn't look like we've got a quorum yet. Getting there. Hi, Ritu.
Hello from Nantucket.
Oh, hello from Nantucket. Right. And hi, Adam. Let's see. And Joe? Is it Joe? No, let's see.
Where's Dan?
Joe and Joe and Dan.
Janet's in a car.
Yeah, I know, Dan. We were worried you wouldn't even be able to get through. Can you hear us? He's shaking his head. What do you think?
I'm going to connect him via his
Here.
phone as well.
Oh, okay.
I can hear you perfectly. I may be calling in on my wife's
Hi,
phone.
Michael.
This comes
Hello.
I can believe
Hello.
it.
I haven't
Hi, Matt. That's
seen
good.
it
Hello,
because
Shirley.
my wife
Shirley.
is showing the kiss.
Okay. Oh, hi, Donna.
Hi, Shirley.
Hello. Hi, Ed. I hear your voice. I don't see
Yes.
your name. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay. See you. Still don't think we have enough yet, right? It says we got, hey,
I think we've got
look
quite
at this. We've got a lot of participants. We've got 68 participants. So we've got a lot of CB2 members, and we have 51 attendees. Wow. Okay. So let me just ask you something, Matt, which is, and Kimberly, you have other people with you too, right? Are they with us? Have they been relevated?
Yes.
Oh,
I'm.
elevated.
Yeah. I'm.
Right, that goes down.
Bhavin Patel has been.
Yep.
Oh, okay, great.
And Shirley, Bhavin is going to need to share his screen to give our presentation, if that's possible.
Yep.
That's possible, yes.
Okay.
I think. And Carter, you're on with us too, right? Carter, our chair.
I'm here.
I'm just going to be putting in a little message right now, which is about the census. So it's going to be in chat. And here it is. Complete the census at. Very hard address. Oh, okay, there you go. Okay, now let's see. What do you think, gang? Do you think we have enough folks? We certainly got enough guests, and I think we've got enough community board people too. So I think I will. Everybody in agreement? Just shake your heads if you think we're ready. Okay, great. So we're going to start. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Community Board 2 Manhattan's Traffic and Transportation Committee meeting. And I am Shirley Secunda. I am the chair of the committee, and I am going to now introduce you to the members of our committee by actually reading the attendance, because it's an easier way to get all their names out there when we're doing Zoom. So, okay, here we go. Everybody say yes, or say this, or say both. Okay, so Ritu Chatri, here you are.
Yes.
Here she is. And Joseph Gallagher. I see you.
I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I see you,
Thank you for
Joseph. And
shopping at
Janet
CVS.
Litt.
Please remove all bags. Yes.
Yep, okay. And Ed Ma. Ed, would you just raise your hand? Okay. Dan Miller, we do have, I know he's here.
He is.
I don't know whether he hears us or not.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, does he hear us? Okay,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I see a little yellow there.
I
And I
can,
know Lois Rakoff is here. I saw her before.
Yes,
Lois,
Hello,
say
everybody.
hi. Okay.
Welcome to September.
And there's Anthony Wong, at least his representation. Anthony, give a shout.
Hello, right here.
Okay, hi, Anthony. And Adam Zeldin, I know I saw before. There you are.
Here I am.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay, and Joseph Flayhaven, I don't see him.
he's here.
Is he here? Okay.
Yes, he
And
is.
I don't think, and George Hykalis is not. He won't be joining us today. So anyhow, I've told you everybody is. I would just like to point out Ritu Shatri. Again, Ritu, please raise your hand.
Hi.
And also Joe Gallagher, make a shout, Joe. Well, anyhow, he's here. Joe Gallagher?
I'm here.
Yeah, okay.
Here.
I just
Yep.
wanted to point out Joe Gallagher and Ritu Shatri and our chair, Carter Booth. Could you just raise your hand or say something, Carter? Okay. They are our hosts tonight. In other words, they are going to be our backup, so that my hands and eyes and mouth are free to do other things. And just now, I'll go into our procedure, which is, if you've seen the agenda, there are 3 items on the agenda. I think that a lot of you are here for the presentation by DOT on University Place for the possibility of reversing 13th to 12th Street. So that will be the first item on our agenda, but we do hear each of the 3 items separately. And this is the way it works. First, the item is presented, and then the committee, that's all of you folks here, ask questions. And so do members of CB2. Hi, Valerie. That's Valerie De La Rosa from CB2 also. And Michael Levine. Yeah, I said hi to you before, Michael. Okay, glad to see you. And what was I just saying? So first, the committee will ask questions. Then our guests, who are all those other folks in the participants list, which are many, 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 will raise their hands to give comments. And I would assume that everybody at this point knows that to raise your hand to give a comment, there is a symbol. And I'm trying to see where the symbol is. Does everybody see it? It's usually in the lower right-hand corner in the participants list. Does anybody? Yeah, there you go. I can see people raising their hands. So you just hit the symbol, and Ritu or I will call on you, or both of us will call on you. So after that, we have comments. Our comments will be listed, it will be limited to 2 minutes. If an awful lot of people want to speak, we may have to reduce the comments to 1 minute. We also may ask folks to just raise their hands in agreement with other people if they are really saying the same thing. So we'll see how that goes. And then after that, you may have questions. So in other words, we will take your comments when you raise your hand. But if you just have questions, please put them into the chat. You see chat there, and we will do our best to kind of amalgamate the questions, ask them, and get our friends at DOT to answer them. So then, once we complete the last Q&A, which would be after our 3rd item, we go into what we call business section, and at the time, it is only the committee that is speaking and deliberating, but all our guests are invited certainly to listen in. And we deliberate as to whether we should do a resolution. We may take some votes. That's not the end. Once this goes out of committee, it goes to the full board. And the full board, of course, is meeting virtually, and that is on September 17th at 6:30 p.m. And I'll try to get some information into chat on that, unless somebody else can get that information on the full board meeting in. And that is where a final vote on any resolution that we do will be taken. And the resolution or resolutions will be sent to DOT, the New York City Department of Transportation. And for those of you who have not been here before, we do have some ground rules. Raise your hand if you want to speak, and you know how to raise your hand. You hit the symbol. Don't call out and don't have side conversations. For the most part, we're going to have you muted anyhow, and I would please ask you to mute yourselves. And of course, don't interrupt when somebody else is speaking. And that's it. That's all the ground rules. That's all the procedure. And now we're moving on to our first item, which is a presentation by the New York City Department of Transportation, DOT, on University Place. It is a proposal and really an invitation for discussion by DOT on possibly reversing 12th and 13th Street, that is 13th to 12th, in the opposite direction. So let me just tell you who our guests are tonight from DOT. It is Matt Lorenz. Matt, you there? Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Sure. Bhavin Patel, and Bhavin, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Are you there?
Yep, you got it right.
Oh, you are. Hi there, Bhavin.
Yep.
Kimberly Rancourt is here also. And I see you, Kimberly. There you are. You're saying hi. And is Jackie Lazaro here too?
Is Jackie on? I didn't see her name. She may not have joined today.
Okay, if you should see Jackie Lazaro's name, Ritu Carter. Just elevate her, please. And that's it. So guys, you are on.
I have one request for Carter. Can you please make the telephone number ending in 253 a panelist? Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
and
So I'll just do a quick introduction, if we're ready.
Yep.
Quick introduction, as Shirley said.
You were talking about sharing the screen, right, Kimberly?
Yeah, so I think Bhavin's gonna do that. But just a quick intro. My name is Kimberly. I'm from the Manhattan Borough Commissioner's Office at DOT. Thank you guys all for having us here tonight. And just to preface this presentation, earlier this year, as part of our discussions with the community board following the 14th Street busway implementation, the CB reached out in a resolution. As part of the resolution, they requested that we study this reversal of University Place from 13th Street to 12th Street as a way to address two of the concerns that we were hearing following implementation of the busway. The first being congestion on 13th Street, and the other one being access challenges from specifically the block on 14th Street between 5th Avenue and University Place. So Matt and Bhavin will give this presentation. They'll talk through some of the changes that we've already made on 13th Street to try to address some of that congestion, and then share our proposal for the conversion.
Okay, thanks, Kimberly.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Kimberly, and thanks, Shirley. Good evening to everyone. I hope everybody's hanging in and doing okay during these tough times and enjoying these few last days of summer. We appreciate you joining us tonight. My name is Matt Lorenz. I'm Director of Traffic Engineering and Planning at New York City DOT. I know some of you through the work I've been doing on the Hudson Square West Village study, but I come to you tonight in a sort of a different capacity to talk about this conversion proposal. So in a minute, I want to introduce a member of my team, Bhavin Patel, who will walk through the presentation this evening, but I just want to kind of set the stage before we get into that with a few remarks about what you're about to see. Bhavin and I have been working with Kimberly and Ed Pinkar in the Manhattan Borough Commissioner's Office and other technical groups within DOT since late last year to explore a range of improvement measures to help address the congestion on 13th Street. So in this case, sort of our range or menu of options for possible improvement measures include three things, and I'll sort of list these from least impactful to most impactful. One is signal timing changes at 13th Street and 5th Avenue to give more green time to 13th Street. It's already been done. Second, some geometric modifications, which Bhavin will walk you through at the 5th Avenue intersection at 13th Street to make it easier for through traffic to sort of bypass vehicles that are turning left onto 5th Avenue. And then obviously the third item, which we'd like to discuss with you here tonight, is a proposal to reverse the direction of travel on one block of University Place from 13th Street to 12th Street. And this obviously changes circulation patterns for traffic in the area. And of the three things I mentioned, it's clear it has the greatest sort of impact of all of these items. So, you'll notice I'm not holding a magic wand in my hands. I don't have the ability to make, traffic just miraculously disappear without any impacts. In other places around the country, they can design their streets to accommodate travel lanes, bike lanes, bus lanes, sidewalks, on-street parking. Everybody gets something that they want. Obviously we don't have that luxury here in New York City and in Manhattan in particular. I think, when we look at these projects, what we try to do is find opportunities to make logical safety and operational improvements where those opportunities exist, and offer people flexibility to make choices about their transportation. We try to tailor our streets to address the transportation needs of the community. So that's why we're here, to speak with you tonight, see if that this proposal meets those needs. And what we try to do is, balance the trade-offs, right? So we have to sort of make these tough choices. We'd like to be able to gain benefits and try to minimize the negative impacts. And we recognize that change does not come without those impacts and trade-offs. And you'll see a couple examples of this in Bobin's presentation. So we see this proposal as offering motorists some flexibility and route choices that they don't have today. I should also add that our public spaces team at DOT is very interested in looking at University Place within the context of extending that shared street treatment that you see today between 14th and 13th Street down to 12th Street. And I should also mention, before I turn this over to Bobin, a couple of points about the data collection and the timing of the studies that we did here. So the proposal here is both data-driven and based on, frankly, our own real world observations. Bobin and I both spent considerable time in the field on separate occasions, watching traffic flow, observing how people are behaving on the streets. We also collected, quantitative traffic count data over several days, weekdays, weekends, and during several peak hours of those days, AM, midday, and PM. That being said, all of you folks live and work in this area on a daily basis. So we're interested to hear about what your day-to-day experiences are and your thoughts on this proposal. So as much as we're here to present, we're also here to listen. And I also want to mention, in terms of the data collection, that our work was done pre-COVID. Obviously traffic patterns have changed a lot since March. People are traveling at different times of the day, different days of the week. They're using different modes to get around. And as we all know, they're sometimes not even traveling at all, right? A lot of us are working from home. So because of all these unanticipated changes due to COVID and the shift in cities' resources to respond to COVID, in March, DOT suspended all what I would say is normal data collection activities that are not directly related to the pandemic response. And what we see now is that travel throughout the city is changing and evolving in a much more dynamic way than at probably any point in recent memory. So we are far from right now what I think anybody would consider normal conditions. So when you think about this proposal, just recognize that this was all this work that we did was really done within the context of pre-COVID conditions, a more normal condition, not the more unusual patterns that you've seen in recent months. So anyway, I don't want to steal any more of Bobin's thunder here than I already have. So I'll turn it over to him to share with you the changes we have implemented already, and then to speak about the conversion proposal. And I think Bobin has about 15 slides to present. So we would ask for your patience as he walks through this, and we'll take questions at the end.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Good evening, everyone, to the board members, the residents that are attending today. Hope everyone's doing well. We know it's, as Matt mentioned, these are difficult times. Unusual times, especially relating to traffic circulation and whatnot. So I'm going to share the presentation. I'd ask if everyone could just hold off for any questions and comments till the end of the presentation, because a lot of times, sometimes, the next slide might have the answer that your question was. Okay. So just starting off, obviously we're here to talk about the University Place reversal. Currently, University Place runs northbound up to 13th Street, and it's 1 block southbound from 14th to 13th Street. So our proposal today is to reverse 1 additional block from 13th Street to 12th Street to the southbound. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today is a little background history in addition to what Kimberly and Matt mentioned, what got us to today, some of the existing conditions and issues that are existing on 13th Street. As Kimberly mentioned, we have done some changes prior to tonight to address some of the concerns that the community has in relating to the congestion on 13th Street. Then obviously we'll talk about the actual proposal that we're here for tonight, which is the reversal of University Place. And then we'll open it up for any questions and comments. So a little background as to what this area has encountered as far as traffic changes. As many of you probably recall that there was a big change in traffic in this area due to the L train shutdown mitigation measures. And part of that was that 14th Street was turned into a transit and truck priority way, which basically meant during normal rush hours, only vehicles that are allowed is buses, MTA buses, and delivery trucks. Passenger vehicles can travel 1 block, but they have to take the next right turn or left turn, depending on the avenue, without getting a summons for that. So at the request of the community, DOT implemented those bans just to ensure there's local access. Prior to that, you were not able to fully travel on 14th Street, so allow that local access, that right turns were allowed. Another thing that was changed in relation to that was the intersection of Broadway and 14th Street, turns were banned. The reason being that in particular intersection is a Vision Zero priority intersection. As again, most of you are familiar with it, it's a heavy pedestrian crossing. So to reduce the pedestrian and turning vehicle conflict, turns were banned at that intersection. An additional treatment also was when University Place was converted southbound between 14th and 13th Street, the street was converted into a shared street, which basically meant that vehicles would have access to the street, but at a much slower speed due to the treatment of planters, and which allowed for pedestrians to actually walk on it, along with traffic and also bike access. And today we're here obviously following those implementations. There is still a need for more changes along 13th Street due to congestion that was related to these changes prior to it. So some of the existing conditions are basically, well, first, this is the area existing street directions currently. 14th Street, as I mentioned, which is in the yellow, is a bus transit truck priority route, restricted to most vehicular traffic during the day rush hours. And then 13th Street is a one-way going east, west. 12th Street is going one-way eastbound, and so forth, 11th Street. So it's a typical Manhattan grid as far as the streets going east and west. As I mentioned before, University Place is a one-way northbound up to 13th Street, and then you have a 1 block of southbound operation to allow for access for vehicles off of 14th Street. So what we started off when we initially started to look at the congestion was we made several site visits in the course from December to February, just to see what the different hours of the day, what the conditions were, what was actually causing the congestion. Sometimes, you know, it's an issue where there's lack of parking. Sometimes it's an issue where it's just vehicles are trying to turn and you have a lot of pedestrians crossing at a particular crosswalk. Or it could just be that signals are not timed, where you have an intersection that further downstream, for example, like University would be green, and then Fifth Avenue, by the time the vehicles get there, it turns red. So the progression is delayed. So we did extensive field visits to see these conditions and to determine what would be the right course of action to alleviate these conditions. The second thing we did was do an extensive data collection. And as Matt mentioned, this was done pre-COVID, so the traffic volumes were at a normal level. We collected during the weekday and on a Saturday, and we collected 3 periods, 7 to 9 to encompass the morning rush hour, 12 to 2, the midday, and then the 4 to 7 to encompass majority of the PM rush hour. And the third thing we did was looked at the overall signal timing plans for 13th Street in particular. And like I said, this was just to make sure that the progression of westbound traffic on 13th Street is not hindered just due to poor signal timings. And one of the things I also want to mention is, in addition to the field visits, when we did the data collection, we actually used cameras. So as you can see, this picture right here was from one of the intersections. So each intersection had a minimum of 2 cameras pointing in different directions. So that also gave us an idea to go back and view the video at certain points. You know, if we could see, okay, between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, there was like extreme traffic or high counts. What was the reason? So we could always go back and look at that camera feed and see what was causing that. So basically, right now, 13th Street experiences heavy westbound traffic up to Fifth Avenue during peak periods, which is especially noticeable during the PM times. This obviously leads to congestion on 13th Street, but also leads to spillback of vehicles in the intersection. As you can see this picture on the lower left hand, this is the intersection of University Place. So that queuing is resulting from Fifth Avenue back to University Place. And this is a concern not only because obviously it's delaying traffic, but it's also hindering pedestrians right of way. A lot of times the crosswalks are blocked, so it forces pedestrians having to walk between vehicles or in some cases around vehicles in the middle of the intersection. The second thing we observed that was an issue, and this relates back to Fifth Avenue, is the left turn treatment that was installed at the intersection of Fifth Avenue and 13th Street. It was preventing vehicles from going through while a vehicle was turning left onto southbound Fifth Avenue. And the left turn treatment is to slow traffic, it's to slow the turners, so that pedestrians have a safe chance to cross the street without vehicles making a quick left turn. So this treatment actually was doing its job. It's doing what it's supposed to, slow the vehicles down. But in the case of 13th Street, because of the limited space of the through lane, any vehicle that was trying to go through was hindered by the left turning vehicle. As you can see from the picture, the white SUV is attempting to make a left turn. The red vehicle basically has to wait till it's completed the left turn. And this ate a lot of the signal timing. So this resulted in significant delays for 13th Street. So as we mentioned before, some of the changes that we were able to do initially to address the concerns on 13th Street, we went ahead. In March of this year, we adjusted the signal timing. And this was adjusted based off of observations and also volumes of traffic. So we shifted 3 seconds of green time from southbound Fifth Avenue to westbound East 13th Street. And this was done for the PM peak period. And as I mentioned, the reason being is because the PM peak period from our counts and number observation was a heavier congestion time period. So what this basically did was it allows an additional 1 to 2 vehicles to go from the West 13th Street to cross the intersection or make the left turn. In the scheme of things, it might seem like, okay, well, just 1 or 2 vehicles, but that's per cycle. And you know, over the course of an hour, that can easily be anywhere from 60 to 90 vehicles that are processed through the intersection additionally that weren't before. The second thing we did just a few weeks back, in fact, was we modified the left turn treatment. As I mentioned before, the left turn treatment actually was doing its job a little too well. So we reduced and modified it. So the first thing we did was the treatment of the raised speed bump. We reduced the width of it. So vehicles turning left will still have to yield and make a slower left turn. They will still not be able to take the left turn at a high rate of speed. And we also reduced the little wedge for the bike lane buffer lane by approximately 4 feet. So this just gives the through traffic more room to continue while not being hindered by the left turning vehicle. So this basically shows on the upper left-hand picture is what the treatment was before. As you can see, with the vehicle waiting for the left turn, there's not enough room for through vehicles. And this, the second picture on the lower right-hand is after. I know it might be a little bit hard to make out, but you can make out the markings that were existing before where my mouse pointer is. So that much of the treatment was reduced. So if a vehicle is waiting to left turn, through vehicles will be able to go through without being hindered.
Hey, Bob, I just want to, before you, Bobbin,
sure.
This is Mac. Before you continue, I think it's just worth pausing here for a second. Just one of the things we observed in the field was that there seemed to be this situation where there was a green light and then, somebody's waiting to turn left. And then depending on how aggressive or not aggressive a particular driver is, they may be able to slip by the left turning vehicle, but a lot of cases there wasn't enough room. And so what would happen is, people behind, the more aggressive folks among us that are driving behind the through vehicle would be honking like, hey, go around this guy, go around this person that's turning left, but there just wasn't enough room. So the idea here is just to give a little, I think I forget exactly the number of feet we gave. I think it was 3 or 4 more feet, just to give some more flexibility for that through traffic to get around the left turners. So we think that'll, and again, we just did this recently. So, that we have yet to sort of see how
this actual
operating.
modification was done. Yep. So this, this brings us to why we're here tonight. And I think the message that Kimberly, Matt, and I myself want to convey is the changes that are being proposed are more or less in steps to address the overall issues in this neighborhood as far as traffic congestion. This isn't like the end all be all. Obviously, as Matt mentioned, there is and talk of extending the shared street treatment further south on University Place. So, this is more or less the third step. The first was being the signal timing change, the second with the modification of the left turn treatment, and this being the third step. So with that in mind, so as most of us all are familiar, that we're here tonight to propose the reversal of University Place to a one-way southbound, as marked by this dotted arrow from 13th Street to 12th Street. And we feel that this will provide an additional option for motorists, especially if anyone is coming off of 14th Street. Right now, they're forced to turn onto 13th Street, go down to 5th Avenue, and then come around to 12th Street. If anyone is on 13th Street itself, between Broadway and University Place, and they want to go east, again, they're forced to go down to 5th Avenue. And as I mentioned, and as most of you might be even familiar with, a lot of the congestion is at the intersection of 5th Avenue because there's an equal amount of vehicles that are turning left that are and also going straight. So that tells us that there is a desire for a southbound need. So this will obviously reduce some of the volumes in 13th Street. And as Matt mentioned, there's always some sort of impact with any changes that occur. So the impact with this reversal would be that 12th Street would have an additional 1 to 2 vehicles per cycle going east now, because they would not be able to continue north on University or turn left from 12th Street onto northbound University. And currently 12th Street, based on our data collection, can accommodate between 350 to 400 vehicles. So by no means it's at capacity, and adding these additional 1 to 2 vehicles per cycle, which again equates to roughly 60 or 70 vehicles in an hour. So, you know, it's an impact, but it's not an impact that 12th Street would be overburdened with. So we don't feel that, you know, this is something that will just shift the problem. And another thing to remember is any sort of changes, especially with street direction changes, it takes a good 1 or 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, for people to adjust to the new traffic pattern, find alternate routes, where people might have been taking 13th Street because it was just, hey, it was just the last westbound street on University. They might resort to maybe 9th Street or 11th Street. So the traffic tends to then disperse, especially if it's going westbound. They don't just choose like the one route. So that's something that, you know, initially it might seem like more congestion or more vehicles are heading on 12th, but once Google Maps, you know, the routing itself, like navigations, they also help out in you know, dispersing more or less. So that's where we are at right now. We'll open it up for questions and comments. I'll leave this slide up just so we can refer back to if needed.
Yeah, Bob, and as I said, we do have our procedure. And so the first thing to do is the committee itself will ask questions.
Sure.
So from Ritu to, as soon as the T and T committee members have asked the questions, all guests will be allowed to do that too. And once the committee asks their questions, then we will ask our guests to ask questions as well. So there we are. So committee, let's see now. Ritu, can you call on the people who are talking? Because I can't see it from one
Sure.
eye.
No problem.
Thank you.
So let me start with Janet Liff.
Okay, so just a quick questions. Do you have traffic counts on University before and after you installed the one piece of shared street? Because I would assume that now that it's no longer a through street, those traffic counts have gone down, but it'd be nice to know if you have records on that. And then also, I don't know if you've put this into the equation, but by adding this one shared street, you're also allowing cyclists to reach both crosstown bike lanes. So I think that's an important element that you did, you know, was not mentioned. But my one question is about before and after counts on University Place. Going north, not south.
Yeah, I don't have them with me right now, but I'm sure we do have them. But I guess Kimberly can check back and get that information to you.
Sure, we can see what
We
council.
were wondering how it was incorporated into the planning process here.
Yeah, and
Ritu,
as a condition was and is of the northbound portion of the street. What happened was there more congestion, less congestion. That's why the counts would be particularly helpful. I think that's what Janet was aiming at, right, Janet?
Yeah, I'm curious how making University basically a dead end has perhaps already, you know, how it's affected traffic. Yeah.
So we do have, I'm sure we have the before counts somewhere. We do have after counts that were looked at as part of this proposal. It is hard to isolate some of the different variables, I think. So there is the fact that it now only goes one block, but there's also the fact that people are not traveling on 14th Street as much and that it's a shared street. So we can get the before numbers, but I think at this point we're looking at the volumes that are there now to determine how they would impact 12th Street. That makes sense.
Okay, our next question is from Daniel Miller.
Thanks. It's a question that you kind of answered in a way, but you went over quickly. Did you consider 13th Street going with no turns on Fifth Avenue on southbound traffic, considering that most people going in that direction likely may not be looking to go south, and that might ease the traffic as well? So no left turn on Fifth Avenue?
No, so we have not looked at that option. That is something that we can look at in the future. But as I mentioned, Fifth Avenue being pretty much a southbound axis going towards the lower teens, and it's an equally heavy amount of left turners. So any little restrictions on Fifth Avenue, like let's say we reduce it, that would just take the brunt onto Broadway then.
Hey, Dan, I just want to add to what Bhavin mentioned here. You're kind of, what you're suggesting is banning the turn onto Fifth Avenue, if I understand that correctly. And
that is correct. Just it seems like if traffic is backing up and it's a complete change and it's really for residential traffic, why not stop any of the crisscrossing right in that area to relieve residents from all this additional congestion?
Right. Yeah. So that's actually very similar to what was tried in Midtown further north a few years back, which is this through streets concept, right? Where we ban the turns, we just force everybody to go through. And one of the things we found as part of that, we eventually went back and took that away and restored those turns, because one of the things we found is that just people were just violating that over and over again. So, you could put up all the signs, you're right. I mean, if everybody sort of behaved themselves, it could work. But I think the experience in Midtown has been that, people just basically violated it, and not just a few people. It became very hard to enforce. And, and to some extent also, I'll just add that, what we're trying to do is give people more options if we can, and more flexibility, and not sort of limit the way they can get around in this area. So that would, it's a point well taken. I just have to say, I think, what we'd like to do is give people more flexibility and not less. And the experience with the through streets.
Could I interject on that point?
Sure.
To me, the plan seems very confusing because, number one, this is a highly residential area. And given the decrease in traffic overall, and the fact that the L train is no longer an issue, to have three streets, turning south off of 14th Street, number one, is that a necessity, or is that a smart thing to do in this new environment? First question. My second question is about 12th Street, which leads to a major hospital. And if there is a chokehold either on University or Fifth Avenue, you're going to be preventing emergency vehicles from getting through on a timely basis. That's my second question. And then my third question is, why not make University Place all one way or the other? Or make it a shared street all the way, one way or the other?
So I can hit on the first and third questions fairly quick, or just to clarify. Right now you can't turn onto Broadway from 14th Street, which is one of the reasons, or really the key reason why we initially converted that northern block. So as Bhavin explained on the first slide in the presentation, as part of the 14th Street busway, we wanted to provide local access, meaning that people will be able to come on and then turn right to get off. And we also knew that Broadway had major safety issues, and that even before we implemented the turn ban, a lot of times traffic agents there were directing vehicles to not turn right onto Broadway because the pedestrian volumes are just so high. So that's why we had that turn ban, which is why we have University Place southbound to begin with in that
They
first
can
block.
turn south on Fifth Avenue.
Correct. I'm just saying I was just clarifying that there aren't currently 3 ways to turn south from 14th Street.
All right, so they're, okay.
And then the third question was
Again,
not all the way, and this is
sorry to interrupt you, Kimberly, but that ignores the initial question, which is given the new environment, given the fact that the L train is no longer an issue, there is reduced traffic along 14th Street. People don't turn off. They stay on 14th Street all the way across. There's no way to, there doesn't seem to be any kind of oversight on that.
Well,
and this
there
is,
is, because there's
this is an answer to a question that may no longer be relevant.
so even though the L train is not an issue at this point, we still have the 14th Street busway, which is camera enforced. So people who do not turn right where they need to turn right do receive violations automatically via the cameras. So it is enforced. Anyone who's traveling through will be receiving a ticket, has been receiving a ticket.
Is anybody else on the committee wanting to ask questions?
Michael Levine.
Oh, right, on the board.
Just that, because I think it is important, the third question that you asked about extending this further, that's certainly something that we can look at. This is the next step. This is what was requested that we look at in the resolution from the board. But as my colleagues have mentioned, this is something that we see as a step in a potentially larger project.
Okay, so Michael Levine.
Hi, I have a simple question regarding a wider area impact. At the present time, 8th Street and 10th Street move very well eastbound, and 9th Street and 11th Street move pretty well westbound. I'm curious to know if you've taken into account or done any studies or anticipation, would there be any negative impact on the traffic flows east and bound, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th Street as a result of the proposed change? Because right now, the traffic does move very well on these 4 streets.
So one of the things, as I mentioned, is over the course of time, eventually vehicles or motorists do find alternate routes, meaning like they disperse into further streets, whereas before they might all just use 13th Street, as it might seem. And in regards to 11th Street, I think when we looked at the data and when we looked at the volumes that would be rerouted, it would be the same case as at 12th Street. It would be additional, like 1 to 2 vehicles per signal cycle. So, and actually 11th Street, like you mentioned and you noticed yourself, is much less traveled than 12th Street. So the impact of 1 or 2 vehicles per cycle on 11th Street would be very minimal at most. And then the further south you go, obviously those conditions would be almost unnoticeable as far as change in traffic volumes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Thank you.
Okay. Is anyone else on the committee, for you two, or on community board 2 that has questions?
I don't see anybody's hand raised.
Okay, then I think we are going to.
So can I, Shirley, I'm sorry to interrupt. Then I would like the panelists to go back. If you could answer my question about potential blockage to the ER at Northwell Health.
So you're referring to as far as the congestion on 12th Street?
Correct.
So as far as you know, and it goes back to the impact, we realize there will be some sort of initial impact, more or less, and we don't feel it's going to be long term. Yes, there will be initial impact as far as additional volumes as people figure out. For instance, you know, people that were used to turning from 12th Street going north on University, initially they might, you know, not be up to speed that, hey, University's been changed, so you will have it. But long term, we feel that there won't be an additional queuing that occurs that's already on 12th Avenue. It won't be any different. And the amount of vehicles that would be rerouted because of this change is, as I mentioned, like 1 to 2 per cycle, which equates to around like 60 to 70 vehicles in an hour, which again, when in regards to the street capacity, it's still well below its levels that would cause any sort of like you mentioned, gridlock. And just to be upfront, yes, initially there will be some adjustment period where it might seem, with drivers getting used to the traffic pattern, there will be congestion possibly, but in once that settles down, which is usually, like I said, 1 to 2 weeks, it'll be as almost like 12th Street is now.
Ritu, just to add to what Bhavin said, if I may interject for a minute, Bhavin's right. Anytime we do any conversion like this anywhere throughout the city, we always go back to monitor, follow up, go out to the field, see how things are operating, and then, make adjustments from there. And as Bhavin mentioned, there's always this sort of settling in period, which is usually a few weeks actually for people to kind of get accustomed to the new changes. The added volume that we expect on 12th Street is sort of the magnitude where, we think that it could be mitigated through signal timing adjustments, right? We just, similarly to what we did on 13th Street at 5th Avenue, right? We give it a few more seconds of green time just to process that extra traffic that would be materializing there as a result of this conversion. So that's the kind of magnitude of the change that we might expect to see on 12th Street too. Something that could be accommodated through a change in the signal timing.
So Shirley, should we turn it over to the attendees?
Yeah, and actually, 3 people had told me that they were going to be attending in advance. And so I would like to have them give their input to start the ball rolling if they're here. The first one is Jay Wiznicki. Do you see his name with his hand raised?
I do.
Okay, so Mr. Wiznicki, I understand you are representing the Claremont Square condominium. We are awaiting your comments.
So thanks for the opportunity to speak. And having not attended this before and not knowing the ground rules, I did prepare a written statement that I've emailed to the chair. And I hope you can take a look at that.
And I did receive your written statement.
That written statement might take me 4 or 5 minutes, so I won't take up 4 or 5 minutes. I'll try to paraphrase it from a little bit. But I live and work in Union Square. I'm the president of the 8 Union Square South condo. I don't know there's any residents as affected by this as we are. Our building is on University Place between 13th and 14th. I've been in the neighborhood for almost 40 years. And at our board meeting last night, our board unanimously voted against this proposal. Not that we have any votes, but in terms of our interest in pursuing it. We have discussed with the DOT, both at their offices downtown and on site in University Place, since the L Street shutdown was proposed right from the beginning. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I probably was the first person to indeed suggest a shared street. Part of what the shared street concept is right now doesn't really exist because we have diverted more traffic than ever down University Place because of what's gone on with the busway, which was supposed to be a trial. In fact, all of a sudden it's not a trial. University Place is a small street. Broadway is a broad way. By the way, it's the oldest north-south street in the entire city. It goes all the way to northern Westchester, actually goes to Albany. The concept that you can't at all, as a commandment, address traffic turning on Broadway from 14th Street because of Vision Zero actually goes against the fact that there were times that University Place was to be a pedestrian mall. There was much discussion about that. So in fact, we believe we should have a trial of making even 13th to 14th University Place a shared street and making all of University Place northbound. And I mean northbound. going against the dictum that it seems to be a commandment as one of the 10, 11, 12, how many commandments there are that you can't make a right turn. And realize that the traffic is less and who knows what's going to happen with congestion pricing, but there's less cars going that way anyway. So that issue would potentially drive traffic in a place that would have many exit points and potentially minimize the congestion. I'm no traffic expert, but I live there and I work there. I've lived there pre-COVID. I've been there in that building since it started 10 years ago. I have, comments that came from our discussion yesterday, and I put those in writing in my letter to you. I would ask you, everybody that's involved in this, to read it. I'm happy to engage as I have before in these discussions. I know that Ritu, if I said your name properly, made some of these comments. Make it a shared street, make it go northbound. Don't let traffic even come onto University Place. Reconsider the turn on Broadway. There's less traffic there. It's not like it was before. We are locked by, we can't have vehicles coming to our building. There's no legal way to have a move in or a move out or a delivery. There's no legal way to do it. And when I asked the DOT about that, their comment was, well, they can park on a side street. Well, which side street can a truck that's moving somebody in and out of the buildings, park on? So my point more is that I would reconsider that. And just because I would take a little bit too long to read the whole statement, I encourage you to look through it. I've kind of paraphrased a little bit. University Place is meant to be a small, quiet street. Broadway is not. Reconsider that. I'm happy to engage afterwards with people, whoever may want to engage with me. There are people on this call who have actually, I met with Kimberly, with Ed, and others. It's just
okay. I think we've got your input, Nikki, yep. Right? But I do have a question. Talking about the northbound, are you talking about from Washington Square Park or West 4th Street all the way up to 14th Street?
I am.
Shared street. You are. Right.
I am.
I just wanted to clarify.
So thank you for asking. So I am, as it has been in the past, maybe not a shared street, and as in terms of shared street, as much as makes sense, as much as you want to try out, but certainly making the whole street northbound as it's been in the past.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And the next correspondence I had was from, let me just see what his name is. Mark Winkleman. Ritu, do you see Mr. Winkleman's name among the attendees and whether he is preparing to talk? Because he said he would be here. Do you hear me?
I can hear you and I'm looking for him. I do not see his name.
Okay. Then, Mr. Winkleman, are you here? Mark Winkleman? And if so, just shout and say yes. I guess he's not. Okay, then we will read his letter later. And the third one is Perry Asher. Is Perry Asher here? Because he also had asked to speak in advance.
I don't see him either.
Okay. All right. Then let's move on to the folks that are raising their hands.
Okay. And if we've missed you, you can always raise your hand and I will call on you. We will call on you. So the first up is Mr. Sui, Ms. Sui, S-I-U.
Hi, everyone.
Hi there. And just so you know, I'm going to be timing folks for 2 minutes. So if
okay, great.
Thank you.
My name is Victor Siu, and my family and I are residents at 21 East 12th. Many of us residents at 21 East 12th and I are on this call. And what we're really concerned about is the stretch of University Place between 13th and 12th. By adding southbound traffic, we're very concerned that you're going to increase the traffic load which is already burdened by trucks that are loading for businesses, and by adding that increased traffic into this residential area, the proposed change really impacts the fabric of the community and also the safety. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about if there have been studies done, because along 14th and 13th on University Place, you don't have that loading. So by adding that traffic into this loading area, it seems like it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Okay, thanks. Okay, who's next?
Next is Stacy Barber.
Stacy Barber, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I also live in 21 East 12th Street, and I have a few questions.
Okay, can you put your questions into the chat? We're going to go to questions at the end.
No, it's a comment as well.
Okay, just give your comment then, but please don't ask the questions, put them into chat.
Okay,
We want to move
my comment is about the 12th Street, which is often closed between Broadway and University because there's a police precinct there. And this summer, there was a barricade closing 12th Street off for a lot of the summer because of police parking there. And that's where during the protests, there were actual riots and police cars were set on fire. And so in order for the safety of the police precinct, they blocked off the street. And so I don't believe that your solution takes this into account, number one. Number two, 12th Street is already quite congested due to all the police vans that are parked illegally in the buffer zone, and it's a one-lane street. One of the other commentators said it's like a tunnel. And you can't turn also. We have the same problem that the gentleman discussed about 13th Street making the left turn onto Fifth Avenue. We have the same problem on 12th Street and University right there. You can't load, you can't get out of a taxi, you can't do anything. People are parked in the buffer zone illegally, usually the police. And that's not taken into account by your proposals.
Thanks, Stacy.
Okay, thank you.
We've got David Gentili. David?
Yeah, we also have a letter from David, so I can read it from it later. If he's
I'm
not
sorry, my microphone was
Yes, you are.
temporarily not working. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is all, I'm gonna keep this to 2 minutes, but it's a bit of a rant. So the L train shutdown is what predicated the 14th Street busway, which predicated also the protected bike lane on 13th Street, which predicated also the protected bike lane on 12th Street. The L train shutdown did not happen, but all of this seems to be permanent now. This was all supposed to be temporary. What we have on 13th Street and University Place currently is an absolute impossible situation for any person who sleeps within 200 feet, maybe even 300 feet of that intersection. Right now we're in COVID, traffic patterns are light, everybody's starting to get amnesia, it's been 6 months, but it was horrible. And I have shared with many of my neighbors an album full of photos and videos that show how terrible it is when 3 inputs go into 1 output on University Place. You're just shifting that exact same problem down a block. Don't tell me about dispersion. Don't tell me about anything else, because we have an absolute choke point on 12th between University Place and Broadway. 12th Street between University Place and Broadway is a single lane of a tunnel. I can't get plywood delivered. I can't get my elderly mother in and out of a cab. I can't do anything. You cannot stop there because it's exactly like a single lane in a tunnel. You have the buffer lane full of vehicles and there's nowhere to stop. There's no, it's to add even a single car per light change is madness. It's madness now. I mean, I have pictures from yesterday at 13th and University Place in the middle of the COVID pandemic where the queue of cars goes all the way back to 4th Avenue, excuse me, and all the way forward to 5th Avenue, solid as you know, bumper to bumper. So when COVID lifts and people start driving more and they're not going to take the trains and they're not going to take mass transit the way they should, right? You know, post-pandemic for a while, it's going to be an absolute disaster. This is very ill-advised. Make it northbound all the way as it used to be and allow the right turn on 14th Street. Stop being stubborn. Stop avoiding the obvious common sense solution to this. Make University Place northbound as God intended from Washington Square Park to Union Square Park, period.
Thank you, David. Next up is Alan Copelson. Alan, are you there? Alan Copelson, calling once, calling twice. Okay, you just muted yourself again.
Is he there?
I'm here.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I live at 12 East 12th Street. And when this change of traffic pattern was implemented on University Place onto 13th Street, I've listened to everybody here, and I happen to agree with them. The traffic on 13th Street is horrible. Actually, the traffic on 12th Street, because people who are heading in the easterly direction along 6th Avenue know they can't turn onto 14th Street any longer, so they use 12th Street as a cut-through. You've taken two residential streets, actually three, counting University Place, and turned them into sheer chaos. It's just, I've lived here for 34 years, and I've never seen anything like this. I've also observed, and I think that you should, that when you did your studies, December and February, I don't know how long in February you did it, but most of the NYU kids are out on the 15th of December and don't come back until the last week or the first week in February. So the pedestrian traffic is greatly reduced during the time that you did these studies. Also, the weather is another factor for doing your studies at that time. My sense would be, if anything, wait until this COVID is over to do your studies and do them over a period of time when the kids are in school and when the traffic is flowing again. And I think you'll see that what you're proposing is just not a viable solution. Thank you.
Alan.
Okay, I think I saw William Kelly's name from the Village Alliance. Do you see his name, Ritu? William, are you there? Maybe not.
I do. Oh, there he is. Should I? Oh, he's up next.
Yeah, William, are you there?
Shirley, I am here, but I didn't have a.
Oh.
Okay, I think that William is here to observe. Is that correct, William?
That's right.
Okay, let's move on, Ritu.
Okay.
Yeah,
next up is Wendy Schenfeld.
Hello.
Hi there.
Okay, hi, Wendy.
She's
we should probably come back to her.
It's not coming off mute. There we go.
Okay, so I said I was echoing some of the thoughts that someone else had made, that the L train was supposed to impact this area. That's why 14th Street became the bus lane that it was becoming. And now that it's not, why aren't you looking at going back to getting traffic on 14th Street, the major wide street that it is, rather than on the small residential streets?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, you just brought up another point. This is a point of procedure, Wendy, but I'm glad you brought it up. I'm sure that there are many people here tonight who all have the same, more or less the same things to say. And since our time is limited, and I know we have so many people here, I would ask that if somebody says something that you really were going to say yourself, could you just raise your hand? And at least we can count them, how many others feel the same way. And Ritu, do you think that would be a good approach? Would you be able to figure out?
I'm not really able to do both at the same time. So what I would suggest is, as I call on you, if your views have already been articulated, if you could just please say who you agreed with, or if we could just condense that, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. Don't worry, we will not factor you out.
We will not. Okay, next up is Joseph Reedy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
18 East 12th Street. So between 5th and University, close to University, and I'm condensing. I agree with Mr. Kopelson. I agree with Mr. Gentile and Stacy Barber. These are good comments. I think that we should delay the study until after COVID is over. That could be a couple of years from now. Prior to the pandemic, prior to the shutdown, once the 14th Street busway was enacted and the potential subway work was going to happen, 12th Street was jammed, totally jammed. So was 13th Street. They were both. I don't think that was a particularly well thought out thing to continue the bus lane on 14th Street when there was no subway work happening. So anyway, we should really think about delaying that study until later on.
Thank you, Joseph. Next up is Samir.
Samir Lavinja, I saw that you put something into chat. Do you want to, and that was a question. Do you want to add a comment?
Oh, he's using an older version of Zoom, so I need to promote him to panelist to talk. Hold on.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
You got to see my face too. What a special surprise. I'll turn off my video so it's fair for everyone.
Okay. I'd like to see you.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'll try to be quick. Just want to say I'm in full total support of this proposal. I've heard some people say like, oh, well, I see this and I see that, or someone literally said, don't tell me about this. Well, I'm sorry, but the facts are the facts, and we should be listening to the traffic experts, not anecdotes from other residents. So I wanted to say thank you to the DOT for really looking at the data here and using the data to inform your decision. A few other things I want to quickly mention. Some people have said, why do we have the 14th Street busway when the L train is no longer an issue? People still ride the bus. They're just as important as people who take the subway, I'll have you know. And people from the Lower East Side do need to get here. And for the emergency vehicles, they can run over the flexi post. That's why they're there. And the University Place is 75 feet wide. Broadway is 80 feet. So it's not like it's that much smaller. And I do agree with what David, I think it was David Gentile said, we should look into making a pedestrian mall. I would love to see University Place be more for people instead of for vehicles. I think that's all I have to say. Just thank you for taking the data-driven approach instead of just listening to anecdotes.
Thank you, Samir.
Samir.
David Gentile just wrote to him on the chat saying, Samir, where do you live?
Exactly.
Next up for us is
we should listen to
Perlman.
Caps.
Steve Perlman?
Chi Perlman.
Oh, Chi Perlman. Hi, Chi. I know you from a long time ago.
Oops, hold on. We're having a unmute situation. There we go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I agree. I think I wanted to thank Matt and Heaven for their research and for their thoughtful analysis of this. I do think we're running into some frictions that I think haven't been factored into all these equations. The main one for me, and for I think for anybody who might be on the same block that I'm on, which is between University and Broadway, is that we're in a really I guess I would say just awkward and stressful situation with what's going on in that police building. And I know it has changed its role and it's changing its role again. However, the impunity with which they park on the street in the safety zone outside of the bike lane has created what Davide called the choke point. And that choke point, for those of us on that block, has just been a nightmare. It's just been extremely noisy, and it's a health and safety violation. It's a hazard. No one can pull over, as others have said, and no one, and we can't even get an emergency vehicle to a residence on that block because they wouldn't have a place to pull over. But the frictions that I think we're running into are, who are we trying to really solve for here? And, are we trying to make more options for motorists, which was what was said, or are we just trying to solve for a way to go back to a calm residential village neighborhood? And I'd like to see if there's some consensus around the notion that this is a village area, and it's been overrun with cars and trucks and traffic in ways that you're hearing very loud and clear. It's been really disturbing to where we live now. So, can we just set the agenda a little bit more broadly, a little bit more coherently around the idea that we need our neighborhood back. And it's not, looking at one or two more cars this way or that way isn't the goal. The goal is we really do need our neighborhood back, and we really do need to make it safe and quiet and do away with illegal parking if we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Nancy Pasley, if I'm saying that right. Nancy, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you. I was looking in the wrong place. I agree with many of the people who have already spoken, so let me mention two things that I don't think the others are going to bring up. First of all, on the diagram that we're all looking at, I think there is something not correct there. Union Square West between 15th and 14th does not go southbound. It is completely blocked off. There is no traffic on that block. So it seems to me that makes it even less logical to have 3 southbound streets in a row, because there is nothing coming down southbound from Union Square West that needs that block. The traffic pattern throughout Manhattan is 1 north, 1 south, 1 east, 1 west, and that helps move everything along. Secondly, I live a little farther away than many of the people here. I live off to the south and west off 7th Avenue. The DOT is trying to give us all flexibility. What this has done has been really unflexible for me. It is impossible for me to get to Union Square from the south and west in a taxi or a private vehicle. And I do take taxis. I find my hips, my knees, my age, the packages I carry makes it often difficult to walk a long distance or climb on a bus, which is faster on 14th Street, but damn slow still on the avenues. So this additional change is really not going to help me, quite the reverse. And I don't know how you're going to count the flow of people who don't come because they can't get there, you know. But I do go to the Green Market, I go to Staples, I go to some of the other stores that are trying to survive, and this is not helpful. So I agree with all the people who have spoken and who have been in the chat, and I'm sure going to speak, is that universities should be northbound all the way to 14th, and we should not be trying to throw the southbound traffic or the east and westbound traffic onto additional small residential crowded streets. And I really do feel that the basic problem is closing 14th Street to through traffic, which is what it's designed for, and trying to put through traffic, which is what it is, on tiny streets that are not designed for it. And I would have thought that traffic engineering would indicate that you use the wide street like 14th for the fast through traffic.
Thanks very much, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay, before I call on the next person, just a little ground rule for those in chat. I'd really love to see some standard questions put in there so that we can address them, and a little bit more civility, please. Thank you. Next up is Lucy.
I follow through with that with Ritu, is that we really can't address all the comments in chat. We will address the questions. And I had told you that at the beginning of this meeting. So try to stick with that. We're happy to answer your questions. We'll be in chat. Okay. Sorry, Ritu, go ahead.
Okay, next up is Lucy Gers.
Hello, Jason Gers here. Sorry for the name mix up on Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I am the chair of the Manhattan Volunteer Committee for Transportation Alternatives, and I'm a resident on 14th Street. I know we've had, maybe 10 people on this call opposing this plan, but we actually have a petition with 300 signatures asking to turn all of University Place into a shared street with the same treatment that we have between 13th and 14th. One reason why I support this change that's being proposed today is that we have a southbound bicycle route going all the way down Broadway. And if a bicyclist wants to turn eastbound, he has to salmon up University Place going into head-on traffic. That's an unsafe condition. Also, opening this route would give incentive to drivers going eastbound to follow the busway rules and make the proper right turn on University Place. The traffic nightmare that everybody was expecting when the busway was put in did not materialize. The actual real data shows that in spite of the anecdotes. And if people are concerned about emergency vehicles traveling on 12th Street, as other people pointed out, there are police and sometimes firemen parking illegally on the street. And there's alternate side parking, which takes up room on the street, which could be replaced with commercial loading zones to allow for moving trucks or people incidentally making drop-offs. All of these things would make 12th or 13th Street move faster for emergency vehicles or regular cars. We don't need free parking for people in this neighborhood when there are ample parking garages around for those who wish to have a car. So that's what I have to say. I support the DOT's plan here. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Michael Certo.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Michael.
Good. I have a few comments. One on the last gentleman who obviously does not live on East 12th or East 13th Street, and we have video that is not anecdotal. It's real. So I just want to comment on that. I would say, first I want to thank the DOT for making some of the changes that I and others had asked for when we met with them. And that's at 5th Avenue and 13th Street, which is was a real roadblock. I would only suggest that in addition to making the road there wider to allow cars to go by. They actually mark the lane to show that they're allowed to go by, so that there's an arrow that says straight. People hesitate. I've watched it, and I thank them for making that change. I would say that there are two key issues in this whole issue that are outside the scope of what we're talking about tonight. One is this issue that it seems to be sacrosanct about making right turns onto Broadway. We live in 2020. There are computers, lights, barriers. This is the key to what we're discussing. The fact that you can't make a right turn on Broadway is what's creating all this issue at University Place. And I don't understand with the technology today why that can't happen. It makes no sense to me as a human being in 2020. The second issue that affects this whole issue, the whole thing about 14th Street, is now that we've established that 14th Street is a ghost town and buses can travel 35 miles an hour, why don't we let either cabs or livery or private, you know, or for hire cabs back, one or the other, put them back on the street. They're obviously not going to affect the 35-mile bus. So that's a second comment I would have. The third comment I would have is that I would imagine that the traffic camera on the corner of University Place and 14th Street is single-handedly today paying off the city's debt. Almost no one turns down University Place. I live there. I live on 13th Street at University. One or two cars turn down every once in a while. When they turn down, they cause a traffic violation and a backup. But people are ignoring it because it makes no sense to them. So I suggest we do whatever the DOT suggests, perhaps make it northbound would be my preference. But I mean, I don't know what the statistics are on the traffic camera violations on that corner, but no one is turning down there. They're getting to Broadway saying, okay, I can't turn here, and they're probably going to 3rd Avenue. And so I think those are the points I wanted to make. And I thank the DOT for following up on that corner of 5th Avenue and 13th Street. But there are single points of failure that will never make this happen unless we solve the problem with Broadway and 13th Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. All right, next up, we have Karen Gillis. Karen, you have to unmute yourself.
Hi, sorry about that. Thanks for the research that you guys are doing on this. I do appreciate the efforts. I live on 11th Street and 5th Avenue, and I'm very concerned about the additional traffic that would be diverted onto 11th Street, which is a very small and quiet residential street. I share the concern and observations of all of the residents who have noted the terrible traffic block-ups on 13th Street and on 12th Street, which I think certainly would be exacerbated by this change. But fundamentally, it doesn't make any sense to me why 14th Street, which was designed and engineered to be the major thoroughfare that's there, why all of that traffic would end up being diverted to smaller, narrower residential streets that should not have that burden. So my feelings are consistent with many of the other commentators who have said, 1, let's do the analysis after COVID. 2, let's consider what's actually happening long-term with 14th Street. And 3, please respect the neighborhood intent of all of the smaller side streets that do not need any additional traffic burden.
Thank you, Karen.
Now, I'd like to pause just to see how many other people agree with Karen and whoever else has been speaking, because things are being repeated and we appreciate what you're saying. but we have just so much time to hear everybody. And Ritu, what would have been your suggestion again, to just ask people to raise their hands or just speak up?
I think if we could just limit the amount of time to 1 minute, please, since I think a lot of folks have already said what they wanted.
Good.
If you could just very briefly say whether you're for or against and what your specific recommendation is, that would be great in order for us to get through to the other items on our agenda.
Right.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
next up is Thomas Brown, who also has an older version of Zoom. So I'm making you a panelist and you can now speak. And you are not available. So I am going to move you back. And we're going to now move on to Freda Siedenbaum. Oh, I'm sorry. Before that, next one up is Annette Johnson.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll just echo what Karen says, and I see that there hasn't been any analysis of what happens to the traffic that would have been going west on 13th Street and is now propelled to go west on 11th Street. If there's been an analysis, it would be, we would very much like to see that, because we have the fears that Karen has just described. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Jack Gindy.
Hello there.
Hi there.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I live at 17 East 12th Street, just off of University, between University and 5th. And I think, as most of we've heard from most of the residents in the neighborhood, that University should remain going north to 14th Street. This making the right turn on University Place from 14th Street has created a nightmare. There's bicycles, there's pedestrians, there's one crooked road for the cars to go. It's very dangerous. I've seen a lot of potential accidents there. And it's, again, diverting so many different routes onto 13th Street. I don't know why it's even necessary to turn right on University. It should be, the right should be on 14th Street. As I think Karen had just said, 14th Street is a major thoroughfare that, has been changed for the busway. I get it, but it's really destroying the neighborhood. So we have to think about the neighbors and the people who live here, and the flow of traffic and the flow of pedestrians and bicyclists, and what's safest. So I think reversing the street is only going to create more traffic and more problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Thomas Hoozies. Thomas Hoozie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, so I'm speaking in favor of the proposal. I live in Williamsburg, but I work on Broadway and 29th, and the way I get home is by biking southbound on Broadway. And every day I get to University and 13th, and all of a sudden I'm met with a one-way going the wrong way for me, and I need to get to East 12th Street. So I don't appreciate the comments from people who imply that only neighborhood residents can have an opinion on these things. The city is one cohesive network, and I think we should be worried about how everyone's getting around the city. So I'd really love it if DOT does this, and it honestly should just be an extension of the shared street instead of just a reversal. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Chul Chung. Chul, could you unmute yourself? There you go.
Hi. So first off, I want to actually thank the professionals who have been working on this. I know that these are tough questions, and I don't doubt their intent. So I'd like to start with that. But That being said, as someone who works in data, the question I have is the data around the non-proximate implications of this change. You know, have we installed cameras at the other intersections? Have we seen what's going on? And I think we need to do that and have a view on how this change will then change those other areas before we decide to proceed.
Thank you. Next up is Frida Siedenbaum.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to say I live on Christopher Street. I've been a village resident all my adult life. And the area where I live, they had wanted to make into a pedestrian mall at a time when there was massive construction and a lot of different things going on, as there are now with COVID. My street, which was a quiet residential street, is now packed with restaurants and police presence, and I have to drive, and so I drive that area frequently. And I have to say that I'm really for waiting to make any final decision, because for the first time in my life, there are apartments available that are affordable in the East and the West Village. My neighbors are leaving the city in droves permanently. And I think this traffic pattern is really, the research is really outdated because of the virus, because we don't know what's going to happen. And we need to wait and see what's going to happen to the traffic patterns. I remember I could walk on 6th Avenue without even looking for a light at one point.
Thank you, Freda. Thank you very much. Now we have Chana Bendov. You have to unmute yourself. Chana? Okay, we're moving on to Tim Ettenheim. And Tim, you've got there you go.
I got it. Thank you very much for the presentation tonight. It's been quite good. I'm in sympathy with the gentleman in the condo between 13th and 14th and University, where turning the shared way into as tight a shared way as it is means that there's no access to the building. We are 40-year residents at 107 University Place between 12th and 13th. And if that block were also turned into a shared way, we and everybody else who's getting a bit older won't have a way to get to our apartment building with an automobile to unload, to load, to pick up and drop off. And for us, that would be a real loss. Also, when the shared way was put in from 14th to 13th, one of the side effects it had was moving the fruit vendor from the corner of, who's at the corner of 14th Street, moving his trucks from directly across the street in front of the now closed dress store to our block, where he has 2 trucks that arrive between 5 and 5:15 every morning. Their reefers go all day long. And he's very loud, he's very arrogant, and he's very rude, and there's nothing we've been able to do to get him to move his trucks. It makes working in our apartment, which is obviously a necessity during COVID, almost impossible. And the noise is unremitting. So anything that you can do to block or get rid of the illegal parking on University Place would be much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. That's actually a comment about illegal parking that has come up in the chat room quite a number of times. So we'll take that into consideration. Next up, we have Jerry Morgan. Jerry, are you there?
Hi, yes. Am I there?
Yes.
Am I unmuted?
You are.
Yeah.
Couple of problems. First, a lot of the cars that supposedly are turning on University Place should be stopped at 5th Avenue because that's the one block where they're supposed to make the turn. But they won't put a traffic agent there to do that, so they come down here. Broadway is where they should go, which everybody has said already. Um, otherwise, it's gotten ridiculous. I live on 13th and between University and Broadway. There are huge trucks there that block traffic very often when they're backing up and loading. Whole Foods and Burlington, whatever else is in there. And they're honking their horns. Everybody is backed up to 4th Avenue or wherever. Then they start and they get stuck at the lights. I think maybe you need more than 3 seconds on the lights if you're going to change them to get traffic moving. And maybe 1 or 2 cars to you that they're backing up to the point where the 1 or 2 cars that you seem to be moving faster doesn't matter. That's it.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, next up we have Jerry Labowitz. And David Gentili, I'm leaving you to the end since you've already had a chance to speak.
Really, we can't have somebody speak twice. David's spoken already. Sorry, David. Who's up now? Ritu?
So right now, Jerry Labowitz, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Yes, my comments were mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry.
Next up, we have Ariana Brandt.
Or is it Anita Brandt?
Ariana, you have to unmute yourself.
There. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi. I'm representing my father, who's an apartment owner on 12th Street between 5th and University. And I agree with, I'm both a motorist and as representing my father, because I've had to drop him off, drive into the city, try to get out of the city from 12th Street, going north and west. But my comment is this: one of the things that I would have appreciated this evening would have been to get a real thorough rundown of who all the stakeholders are in this situation. We're hearing from the residents, and I think all of us who know that area are very, very protective of it. Obviously, there are motorists involved, there are bicyclists involved, but I don't feel like we've gotten a whole picture of everybody who has a stake in this. And the other thing is, I didn't think we got a picture of what the alternatives were that were considered and why they were eliminated in favor of this one. This particular phase 3 seems to me, as other people have said, that it can wait. Why don't we see what the benefits of the first 2 phases are once they've had a chance to be adjusted to? So I just wanted to underline that. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Susan Ettenham. Susan, you're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Hi, I just want to echo the illegal parking, which really is just absolutely beyond comprehension. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a public school teacher and I sometimes can't hear my students teaching.
Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, last but not least, Christopher Moyer.
Hi, this is Christopher Moyer at 21 East 12th Street. I came into this tonight with a fairly open mind, and I can say after hearing the presentation, I am firmly against this change and would actually be in favor of reversing 13th to 14th back to northbound. And I think the other thing that hasn't really been taken into any consideration is the impact on the businesses. This is all resident speaking, but I think this would actually have a very negative impact on all the small businesses due to the increased congestion as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christopher. Believe it or not, Shirley?
What? Yep.
That's it.
Oh, okay, great. And I just have a couple of letters. We got 18 letters. I'm not going to read all 18 letters. I will read excerpts. This Mark Winkleman, who didn't show, I will read what he said. I find it intriguing. He's from 22 East 11th, and he's not really thrilled about the reversal either. But what he does say is, and other folks have voiced this too, is instead you should make University Place a park-like walk zone, extension from Washington Square to Union Square, and close it for all but essential delivery traffic. thus make it more accessible for the enjoyment of all non-vehicular New Yorkers. And we have heard that. I'd really be curious as to how many people in that area might prefer something like that. And really can't figure out how we can get that response. But anyhow, that's one thing. We, by the way, have our own resolution from back in 2019 asking for something like that ourselves. So it isn't a new idea, and maybe DOT should be looking into it. Anyhow, this one is from Perry Asher, who was the other guy that said he was going to attend. So I will just pinch hit for him. And he said he feels it would be even worse by extending the southbound traffic on University of 12th Street. And he thinks we should bring back the idea of a pedestrian mall between 14th and 13th, only on University Place. So those are two of those. And for the most part, the rest of the 18 letters were really not in favor of the proposal. And I think, we can go into questions now. You two, would you want to go into chat and just pull out any of the questions out of there?
I think
so that we
some
can
of
ask
you
the DOT folks?
Okay. Did making the turn wedge less wide and allowing through cars to go around impact the safety of pedestrians? Question for DOT.
DOT, here's some questions for you that we received in chat. So could you answer as we ask them?
Yeah, I think, oh, Bobbin, you want to jump in? Or I was just going to say, I think one of the things is we just made that change literally like a couple weeks ago, and we haven't really had time to assess that. One of our goals is not to remove that feature, but just to change it, just to allow vehicles to slip by. So to be honest, we haven't been out there to really gauge the effects of that on pedestrian safety.
But I think just as a general answer, it was a shift, but it's kind of one of our, we always have to look for a balance between the various users. And so I think it's still there, the safety feature, it's just modified slightly to find a better balance for the traffic and the pedestrians in place.
We had another comment about NYPD using 12th on University to Broadway for parking, making bike lanes inaccessible and slowing traffic. Next, more about police cars. That seems to be a huge issue in traffic backup.
Can I respond? I know that's not really a question, but I can respond to that topic since it's come up a few times if you'd like.
Sure.
So we, after, I suppose it was maybe our January meeting with CB2, we did meet with PD on site to talk about the issues. And then we've had some plans, or we will be installing flexible delineators, which have not been installed, or I'm sorry, I can't recall exactly on that block if they've been installed but are too far apart. I think we're adding some there, which should help prevent that kind of parking. And we will meet with them again and talk through the issues again once we've installed those. We're hoping that will deter some of the parking. And we'll also maintain the 11 feet so that emergency vehicles are able to use the bike lane as they should be able to use.
Thanks. One of the other questions was, is there a need for a northbound street between 4th and 6th Avenue? 4th Avenue and 6th Avenue, since everything else is southbound.
So this is only a one block change at this point. So the rest of the street remains northbound. And the only, even if you could continue, you can't go further north except up to 14th Street, right? And then as was mentioned, Union Square West was southbound and that block is now closed. So I'm sure we can get a more technical answer from the engineers on the line, but I think there is still, the majority of the corridor is still proposed to be northbound in this proposal.
Yeah, we didn't, I think that part of the answer here is, we didn't want to completely disrupt the whole, traffic pattern in this area, and by, making University Place one-way southbound for many, many blocks. I mean, because Fifth Avenue southbound, Broadway's already southbound, this would be another southbound street. So really the one block conversion, the idea was to give people a way out to the west via 13th Street and to the east via 12th Street, but not to, continue that farther, because there is still a need for some northbound connectivity in this area.
Okay, we have another question here, which is, can you address the traffic and safety impacts along University Place between 12th and 13th by the proposed change? And there was a follow-up to that saying ambulances can't get through, no one can get out of a cab or Uber or get a delivery. So it was about safety here.
Safety on University between 12th and 13th?
On University, and this follow-up was on 12th between University and Broadway.
So I think that the 12th is sort of the same question as before. The plan to add delineators to prevent some of that illegal parking that's happening, and that we would discuss with PD again. And as far as, it's kind of a vague question on the safety. Can it be helpful to be more specific?
Another question here is, what other alternatives were considered?
So I think we walked through some of the two things that we've done already, which are not necessarily alternatives, because we're looking at them as a package or a series of changes.
Could you just reiterate that?
Sure. So this is not an alternative, but it's one of several things that we've looked at doing, and we've done the first two already. This is a third.
Could you reiterate the first two alternatives?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Kimberly, this is Matt. I'll just jump in here. So the first thing that we did, as I mentioned, as Bobbin mentioned, was to retime the signal at Fifth Avenue and 13th Street to give more time to 13th Street to help alleviate the delays and reduce the queuing. And the second thing was also at that intersection at Fifth Avenue and 13th Street was to reduce the size of that left turn wedge that drivers need to drive around when they're making a left turn onto Fifth Avenue from 13th Street. And the purpose of that was to enable the through vehicles that follow to have the flexibility to drive around those left turn vehicles. So those were the two changes.
Yeah, and those two were implemented, you had said earlier.
Yes, the signal change was in March, and the other one with the geometry, left turn wedge geometry change was just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
But
I just think that the question that
sorry, Shirley.
I think that the folks are asking if any alternatives to this reversal that's being proposed were considered that might do similar kind of improvement. Have you considered any alternatives that might work? And if you did, I think the other part of the question is why were they eliminated?
We haven't. I think, we wanted to kind of have this discussion tonight, engage the reaction. I think we have, there's some things to think about here. We need to sort of regroup. I don't know, Kimberly, if you want to add your
just
thoughts.
Reiterate that this was specifically a request from the community board for us to look at, right? So we are coming back with the proposal per that request.
Right. So something we were asked to test, so we tested it.
Any other questions, Rita? I'm trying to find
Going through. Why is the no right turn on Broadway rule set in stone?
Oh, that's a good one.
Again, because it's a Vision Zero priority corridor. Priority intersection. Sorry, it's getting a little late. It is a Vision Zero intersection. We saw major concerns with pedestrian safety, huge pedestrian volumes, and obviously Vision Zero and pedestrian safety is a huge priority for our agency. And so in looking at the corridor and all of the various intersections along 14th Street as it was analyzed over the course of several years, that was identified as a very important step for us to take in order to keep pedestrians safe at that location. And as I mentioned earlier, even when it was possible to make that turn when traffic agents were there, it was frequently, they frequently were flagging people to continue instead of turning because there were too many pedestrians for them to turn safely.
Okay, thank you. The next question is the elimination of all traffic from 14th a permanent change?
So it's not, let's just be clear, it's not elimination of all traffic from 14th Street. We obviously still allow buses, but also trucks and vehicles are allowed to access each block for a block or two until they have to make the next right turn. And it's from 6 to 10. But it is, the mayor announced earlier this year that we would be making this change a permanent change, along with several other busway projects that he announced around the city that are now moving forward. So just big picture, I know there's a lot of questions about 14th Street and making it permanent and about the bike lanes in relation to the L train and why we're still looking at that. And just want to remind folks that citywide, like City Council last year passed the master plan bill that is asking DOT to put in more protected bike lanes, more bus priority throughout the city. So we really do have, we're really getting pushed to add these types of changes to our streets rather than to take them away.
Can DOT speak to the number of violations of cars not making the right at University and instead passing through Broadway?
I don't have that data here. I can look into it. It is something I took a note of earlier because I thought that might be helpful for us to.
Another question was, why is the right turn onto University Place from 14th Street necessary?
So as we said, the turn on to Broadway was banned. So if you're looking at the corridor on 14th Street and the busway and wanting to allow people to have access to their blocks or to businesses on each block, which was something that was not included as part of the original L train plan, but that we added in response to concerns that we heard from the community as we developed this alternative 14th Street busway plan. And so we wanted to allow people to access, for example, the block between Fifth Avenue and University Place on 14th Street. But then if we don't allow them to turn onto University Place, then they're traveling all the way through to 3rd Avenue, which it sort of contradicts the goals of the busway. And I understand that there are some concerns about, or some thoughts that vehicles are doing that anyways. And so that's why I said it would be good for us to look at that. And maybe some folks on our team from the 14th Street team have been looking at that, but I don't have that data here.
Now, Janet Liff has asked, why not make University Place two-way? You know, University Place actually was two-way in the first place. And the reason that it was made one-way was to make room for the bus that was heading north. But that bus is no longer there, although the community really was very sad to lose it. Anyhow, any comments on that, Matt or Kimberly?
Sure. I think one answer, and this is sort of leads to our interest in having a longer term conversation with the community board about changes that, for example, you mentioned that you asked for previously to add more pedestrian space. And so as we move forward with potential, you know, if we do this conversion and then we're able to make it a shared street, the idea is to be able to add more of that pedestrian space. So if we have a two-way street, there's less room for us to add those kinds of amenities.
There's another question about, is there a possibility to eliminate parking on these streets in order to move traffic through faster, provide delivery options and safer bike lanes?
On 12th and 13th or on University, or, I mean, we have eliminated a lot of parking on 12th and 13th Street as part of the bike lanes. And obviously people have different feelings about that. So I think at this point, we feel like we've balanced the need to retain some of that curb access and to have the bike lanes function as well. But if there are specific locations, and I heard a comment earlier about adding some commercial voting, I know there are some spots that have been called out to us, but if there are additional like specific locations where you feel like the parking regulations really should be changed, please do reach out to us.
There's another question. Would any of this affect West 15th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue?
I would defer to the folks, my colleagues on that one. But I don't,
Was that 15th Street between 6th and 7th?
Yeah.
I think that's, you know, I think that's pretty far away from the area we're talking about. I'm not to say there wouldn't be any impact. Potentially there could be, but I think it would be very minimal, given that it's quite a distance away.
I'm scrolling through as quickly as I can.
Yeah, I see that there's one that is asking why there's a need for so many southbound. In other words, 1, 2, 3 southbound streets, one right after the other. I think it's been asked before. Worth asking again, I guess.
sure, I think the answer is the same unless my colleagues have something to add. But essentially, it's not that it has to do with the 14th Street changes and the need to have a way for people to turn off of 14th Street after accessing the block between 5th Avenue and University.
Okay, that's repeat question. What is the impact of transferring all the westbound traffic now on 13th Street to 11th Street? There hasn't been an analysis of data unless, has this been analyzed?
So, yeah, so the impact, I think I mentioned this, would be similar to 12th Street. Obviously, when we did the data collection, we looked at the volumes on University and 11th Street. And 11th Street currently is fairly very low volumes, just because if you're familiar with the area, and as you can see on the screen, 11th Street does not run through across. So basically, majority of the vehicles are coming from Broadway onto 11th. So the impact of westbound traffic on 11th would be at most similar to what's on 12th Street, which would be 1 or 2 vehicles a cycle. And as I think we mentioned previously, this is all predicated on, you know, as people get used to the traffic pattern, they will find alternate routes, right? So if they're coming north on University Place and they want to go west, they might as turn onto West 9th Street first before they get to West 11th Street. So we don't anticipate like crazy amounts of traffic using East 11th Street that normally would have gone to 13th Street.
Okay, we have a follow-up question here. Will you consider making University northbound through 14th Street and make vehicles turn left onto 15th Street for westbound traffic?
As was mentioned, the block of Union Square West between 15th Street and 14th Street is currently closed to vehicles, and we don't plan to reopen that. It's part of adding pedestrian space to the Union Square area.
Okay.
Well, I have a question really in this same realm. And I know that originally University was going south to divert traffic off 14th Street because of the busway that cars are having to turn at the first possible turn. And so University was made south to allow for that. And I'm just wondering if right now the busway is really without any kind of traffic at all, and there just doesn't seem to be that need anymore. So is there really still that thrust to have to make University Place southbound? Is that an absolute? Or is there a potential for considering possibly making it northbound all the way or southbound all the way?
I think those are a few different questions. Southbound all the way and northbound all the way have different concerns that we have to think about. But as far as returning it to northbound, because traffic is currently lower along the 14th Street corridor, is not something that we're considering. As I mentioned, the mayor announced that the 14th Street corridor would be a permanent busway now, and that we're expanding the various busways around the city. And so we're not looking to add traffic back to 14th Street.
So that was another question. Does being a Vision Zero intersection mean that no changes can be made?
No, it doesn't mean that no changes can be made. It means that we want to make sure we're making it as safe as possible.
Okay, I think we've gotten through most of them.
Great. Okay. Then
I apologize to everyone in case I missed your question.
right, and we thank our DOT representatives for coming and bearing with us and answering our questions and giving comments. And we will discuss it in our business session, as I said before, and chances are there will be some kind of resolution. So thank you very much. And I think we're going to move on to our next topic.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Shirley.
Oh, thank you. And so the next is actually, this is a presentation and discussion of potential visual methods to illustrate community transportation issues. And this came about really because one of our committee members, Adam Zeldin, was experimenting with various kinds of computer visualizations and approaches to see if we could use these kinds of approaches, first of all, to find out certain kinds of conditions, and then to analyze whether these conditions needed attention. So I'm just going to turn it over to Adam. Adam, are you ready?
Absolutely. Thanks, Shirley. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes. Can everybody see Adam's screen?
Great.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. That's exactly right. You know, we have been thinking, you know, on the committee about some of the different data sets that are available to us that we can leverage maybe to explore opportunities for topics for our committee, or as we are exploring different topics on the committee, you know, what are different data sets or visualization approaches that we can use to support or substantiate some of the positions of the committee. So this is really meant to be just sort of an exploration. This topic is just kind of an overview of some different examples that we can consider. And then we'll also talk about some different applications from those examples. So as a brief overview, our agenda in this topic will be to look at crash location analysis. So looking at some public data of all the motor vehicle collisions in our community board to identify hotspots. The next topic we've got are some of the 311 complaints that are related to traffic and transportation topics. And then the third topic that we've got is around open streets and where those open streets are and where they might be missing. So without any further ado, I'll get going. And then I do ask that people hold their questions till the end. We will provide opportunity for people to ask those questions. So for our crash location analysis, we pulled in a fairly large data set from the New York City Open Data website. And we filtered it down to only the crashes that took place within the boundaries of Community District 2, which is, you know, the area served by Community Board number 2. And then we've visualized them here. So there's 4 different charts here. You can see all of the crashes. And then I've got a heat map showing all crashes involving a pedestrian or cyclist who was injured or killed. And then I've got a visualization here showing just pedestrian crashes, you know, involving a pedestrian who was injured or killed. And then likewise here, just the cyclist crashes indicating a crash where cyclists were injured or killed. The coloring goes from sort of this dark blue to this white hot blue. The white blue really indicates a larger number of crashes taking place at that location. And then the darker blue is less crashes taking place there. I'll note that this visualization here is about 8 years of data, but we do have the ability to filter that down using a Tableau dashboard. So I'll just briefly kind of show an example of that. I can go switch screens here. So this is kind of a live version of that same visualization, and you can see that there's like a crash date filter that you can use to dynamically extend or restrict the time frame that you're looking for. So you can kind of see, you know, over certain time periods or looking more recently, are there areas, you know, that are more dangerous, either for, you know, motorists or for pedestrians or for cyclists. So this was kind of the first example. I think, you know, the applications would be to, you know, possibly identify areas in need of additional safety features, or if we're talking about, you know, a particular block on the, you know, in the committee, we could use some of this data to substantiate any of the different items that we would have in a resolution. So for example, if, you know, we were requesting additional safety features, we might be able to include some of the, you know, individual crash records or a visualization showing the density of crashes in a specific location. So the next one, the next use case that we've got here, I'm moving it along. I know everybody is staying late, so we're not going to linger. The next one we've got here is 311 complaint location analysis. So there are a ton of different reasons that are categorized in the 311 data. I tried to pick out sort of the most prevalent complaint types that relate to traffic issues, such as noise or street conditions, sidewalk conditions, and so on. I will say, you know, there were like 27 million 311 calls over the last 10 years that we had to kind of filter down first to show just those calls in Community District 2, and then to further filter it down just to those relevant to the Traffic and Transportation Committee. Another thing I'll point out here that, you know, I probably could have said on the last one is, you know, these visualizations are only as good as the data quality as far as completeness and accuracy. So if, you know, a row in the data set is missing location data, that, you know, 311 complaint isn't going to show up in our graph. Likewise, if a 311 complaint for some reason isn't entered into the data set, it wouldn't be included in this graph. Overall, the data looked pretty consistent, so I think we can still use some of these visualization approaches. It's not like the data is, you know, unusable. It's pretty good. So this is the example for a 311 complaint location analysis. As I mentioned, we took the 311 data, filtered it down to traffic issues in our community board area. And this one is also a dynamic dashboard. So I'm going to tab over here. So the dashboard does allow you to select individual dates. I know this is probably small for some of you, and I'm sorry for that, but this created date as a filter, so you could extend to a specific time period that you're interested in, and then you could select any of the complaint types that you're interested in to see visually where those complaints are taking place. So for example, street and sidewalk noise, you can see a couple of hotspots, for example, McDougal Street. And then you can also see a pivot table here just showing the number of complaints for each of those different categories in this time span. So if we look at the entire time span from 2010, you can see that there were 21,000 general noise complaints, about 13,000 street condition complaints, and so on, just to see what are the most prominent issues being called in to 311 about. And likewise, you know, you can select all these different complaint types to see, like, you know, where are traffic complaints most commonly located, and so on. I think, you know, as far as the application, you know, we can use this to identify areas that might, you know, need some additional attention from DOT, or if, you know, we're putting together a resolution you know, we could use some of the 311 data to support any of those resolutions. I kind of like this visual. I don't like the effect. I live in the area, but I think this very clearly shows the amount of traffic going into the Holland Tunnel, specifically along Broome Street. So this is pretty striking. I think, you know, a good example. I am going to go back to the PowerPoint and move into our third and final topic, which was the open street location analysis. So the initial goal here was to see what areas of our community district are served well by the open streets and what areas might be missing those open streets. So in order to do this, I took a data set of all of the building footprints in the city, and I limited it down to our community district. And then I calculated the distance from each one of the roughly 5,000 buildings in our community district to an open street. So this first view is what you see there. So you can see this key here shows green being 0 feet from an open street, up to red being, you know, about 2,300 feet or so from an open street. And then on the map itself, you can see the solid black lines indicate those open streets themselves. And then you can see all the buildings in the community district shaded by the color corresponding to how far they are from an open street. As I was reviewing this with Shirley, she pointed out a very important thing, which this graph overlooks, and that is this does not identify the hourly and daily changes in the open street location. So the open streets are not permanent. They're open for, you know, as little as a few hours a week. So it's important to consider that as well, which kind of took me to a video approach, sort of like an animation, which I'll just show quickly now. So this, hopefully everybody can see it, is an animation that shows throughout the course of the week how the locations of those open streets change, and likewise, you know, how the distance of each of those buildings changes throughout the course of the week. You can see that the time of the week up here, you know, Thursday evening into night. At night, as all the open streets are closed, you do see all the buildings turn like a dark brown color, just indicating that, you know, it's not applicable to calculate a distance since there are no open streets. And then following this, I realized that, you know, more important than looking at each hour individually, it's kind of important to aggregate all of that and to consider sort of like a blended distance of, you know, average. It's not really the average, but, you know, what's that sort of overall average look like? So I took each of those different slides that creates this animation and then blended them together, which is right here. So you'll see that this is pretty different from the first graph that we saw that showed a lot of green throughout the entire neighborhood. But as you can see here, a lot of the areas that were showing up in green on the first area, or excuse me, on the first chart, really don't have that consistent open street presence. So they really are underserved by those open streets. You can see some of the open streets are really open throughout the entire applicable times of the program, but then some of the streets are really just open for a few hours a week, and you can see the streets themselves show up as sort of a faded gray to indicate, you know, that blended average that we took of all those images, really just indicating that the streets aren't there all day, every day. I did put these together side by side here, so you can just see sort of the contrast between the initial approach of, you know, all the different open street locations in our community and the distance of our neighbors to those open streets versus sort of averaging it out over the course of the week you sort of see a different picture. The last thing that I'll point out is, I did mention some of that daily and hourly fluctuation in the amount of open streets. So that's not what I intended to do. Here we go. So I did graph out over the course of the week, Monday morning through Sunday night, how many miles of open streets there are in the city, and then how many miles are in our community district in particular. So the height of the bar itself is the number of miles of open streets in the entire city, and then the blue part is this segment of that's within our community district. So you can see that during the week, the city itself has an extensive amount of open streets, but as a relative share of that, there's not a lot in our community district. So that kind of concludes the presentation that I had. Thanks for listening, and I welcome any questions that anybody has.
Right. Well, thank you, Adam. And I think these are very revelatory myself. I've never looked at the various components in this particular way. So as I said, we always ask the committee and board members first if they have any questions. So again, raise your hand and let us see if you have anything to ask. We're trying to get to our participants. And I don't see anybody's hand raised from the board or the committee. So going, gone. Well,
I think, Adam, that everyone's a little tired, and so you shouldn't take it like we're not interested. I think it could be super helpful in making our points, and when we also ask for specific requests to the various agencies.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic.
Thanks, Ritu.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would be helpful. And that, in fact, is why I did ask Adam to give this little presentation. I think it has a lot of potential. How about our guests? Let's see if any of our guests have any questions.
Can I ask something? I can't find the raise hand on phone.
Oh, okay. Oh, great, Valerie.
Oh, hi. Adam, obviously I'm a huge fan of your work. We've worked together before using the data visualization. So I think this is completely amazing, what you put together and the time you put in. You're a Tableau master wizard. And obviously this is going to be a huge benefit to traffic and transportation, and just looking at what new insights can you glean from from like looking at this data on a regular basis. So I think I completely support that. But I would like to also throw out, I think that I would love for you to speak to each of our committees, specifically. I know that Beta NYC does these tutorials on how to use the amazing data sets that we have access to, but it's so nebulous that maybe if you could maybe speak with each committee chair and just maybe with your suggestions of how they could use of what issues they could be looking at using the open data NYC, because it's so much more than just like someone who actually knows the data set for our community district. So that's one thing. And then, even to maybe then take it for the next phase further to maybe have you train someone on each committee, because that's a lot of work for you to try to do it for all. But maybe you want to. But that's what I would just throw that out there. Just you have such an amazing skill set. I just love to find a way to syndicate it across the board without overtaxing your time. But
right. Yeah, thanks, Valerie. Those are great ideas. Actually, we had in mind your committee, which we thought it might be of help too, in terms of the open restaurants and open streets restaurants, and identifying areas where there really is a lack. Areas where there may not be any connections and so on. Would you be interested in something like that? If, Adam
yeah, definitely. In the package that we sent off to the elected officials in June, we have some of Adam's work in that. So all of the images, the visualizations that we include in our 22-page package for for our recommendation for the open restaurants program, we do have his work in there. So we have been talking offline about that. So yes, definitely. Thank you.
Maybe we can talk about it when you do that in October, your next look at the program and what's going on. Whatever.
Sounds good.
I think Adam's ready to do that, right, Adam? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so.
And I really.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Oh, I was just going to say, I love the idea of, democratizing it and training other folks and getting people access. I think some of the data sets are a lot easier to kind of use, and some of them require a lot more manipulation. For example, the Open Streets data set was great as far as just containing the locations of all the streets, but the times that they're open, that was kind of hard to parse into that sort of, over the week clock showing kind of that animation hour to hour. But I think the point still stands, like, yeah, let's get other people thinking about the data that we can use and thinking about how to use it.
Yeah, and I know that on some of the sets we've worked on together that you've had to use like the longitude and latitudinal coordinates, and that's sometimes not as intuitive for a lot of people as well. So, got it. Thanks.
Okay. Well, the third item. Oh, unless anybody else have any comments, any questions, et cetera. And I guess our guests don't either, eh? Okay, so let's just talk about number 3. I think maybe we're being a little premature on that because it was going to be a discussion of the need to add open streets in areas that lack them in CB2. And it would be based on the findings from these methods that Adam has just shown us and shown the patterns of. And yeah, I mean, from the map that I looked at and where those red areas are, which show a tremendous dearth, maybe it is worth looking into them. But I'm not quite sure exactly whether we should be doing that right now. So Adam, what is your thought about that? I mean, are there certain, we're moving right into the next number 3 item. And I just wondered, Adam, what is your thought on that in terms of those red areas? Are there any that really stand out that we should be saying to DOT, look, here are some areas that maybe would need an open street that don't have it, say the red areas or the yellow areas? Are there some areas that need more hours of open streets? I mean, this may require, I guess, a kind of more in-depth analysis, do you think? I mean, rather than identifying something.
I found that, this visual, this is the one that I mentioned, the blended view that takes, each of the different hours throughout the course of the week and blends it into a single picture, so you can see just on average where there's strong open street availability and, where there's not. I think that this visual is probably the best for trying to identify areas that are maybe missing either open streets or open street hours. Up here, in sort of the area that we were just talking about, it looks underserved. And then I would also just point out that that Soho on the first graph showed really a lot of open streets, but those aren't necessarily open streets that are persistent throughout the whole week. So it might be worth considering some open streets that are, a little more persistent throughout the week. But Shirley, I'll defer to you if you think we should wait to, put together a resolution.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking of identifying which streets, and it seems like it's a big chunk to bite off. But I'd ask the committee, I see that Pete Davies is saying who will manage those streets. Well, obviously we wouldn't suggest them except to say to look into them and to confer with whatever the local neighborhood group is. Or, there are bids already and other organizations managing some of them. And it would have to go the step further, I guess, to contact actual entities within those areas. And if we did anything, we'd be asking DOT to look at them and then also confer with whoever the entities were in those areas. But again, like which ones and so on. Does anybody on the committee have any feelings about that? Any thoughts?
I just have a question. Do your open streets include restaurant streets?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So this is showing 3 types of open streets: open streets restaurants, open streets full block partner, and the open streets that are, I think, just the standard open streets provided by the DOT. As you know, the open streets restaurants are, while they still have sort of a general transportation impact in that they provide space for pedestrians and cyclists, they are sponsored by the restaurants, and they are only operated after 5 p.m. on Fridays, and then Saturdays and Sundays from I think about noon to 11 p.m. So you can see those open streets restaurants do show up as sort of a very faint gray because they're open for so few hours within the week.
Right. So actually, though, our committee would be concentrating on just the open streets, whereas Valerie's
That's correct.
would be concentrating on open streets, restaurants and open restaurants, and that's why we were asking Valerie if she might entertain a presentation on this sort of thing. So does anyone else on the committee have any thoughts about this? Do you think we should be trying to identify some streets tonight, or just give it some time for us to just mull it over? And anybody?
I'd say give it some time, but it's sort of hard to separate these things because there's certain streets like Bleecker that are chock full of outdoor restaurants. Probably could use a shared street treatment because they become very dangerous for the street users. Maybe, so it becomes, it's the hours. I don't know. These things don't fit very carefully. But anyway, I would suggest that we process all this.
Right.
Surely there's one more piece of information I think we might want, and that would be the residential density. If there's a way that Adam could take some of this wonderful analysis and then compare it to the residential density of the areas that are least served with open streets, it would give us a hint as to which of the areas we might want to recommend. The higher the residential density and the less open streets they have, the more we might be inclined, if we could find sponsors, to recommend expansion of open streets. So Adam, I don't know if this is possible, but I think adding residential density might be very useful for this committee.
And,
Thank you. That's actually a really good point.
To me, that sounds very logical. Adam, what do you think?
I was just going to point out that the buildings data set that I use to get all these, floor plans of all the different buildings in our community, it does include the number of apartments in the building. So I think if you made an assumption that on average 2 people, I could look it up, whatever the average number of people who live in an apartment is, and just multiply that by the number of units in each building, you could sort of extrapolate the population density. And I agree that sort of using like a weighted approach like that makes sense if we were going to propose additional open streets. So thank you.
One other thing, Adam, if you can hear me. You have a red and brown zone right by Hudson River Park. So you may also want to consider open areas that already exist in our neighborhood. So that whole corridor of heavy residential is actually serviced by open space by Hudson River Park on the west side.
Agreed. And yes, and thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I mentioned that to Shirley when I was sort of demonstrating this to her individually. Agree with you completely. This is only showing the Open Streets program, and it does not take into account, shared streets or like the Greenway, et cetera. So I agree with you that, we should consider that and how that impacts.
Right, and with Hudson River Park, and Dan, I'd like to ask you that question too, because I did comment about this to Adam, which is that it's incredibly crowded, right? So that there's a kind of a pushing out, and we were even talking about moving the bikeway, right, to the curbside on West Street.
Well, yeah,
Interestingly
enough, next Tuesday at our Hudson River Park Advisory Council meeting, we're going to be speaking to state and parks, state parks and state DOT about the possibility of extending the Greenway to mitigate that extra human-powered traffic flow. Finally, they are coming to the table, and it'll be the first conversation we have, and I look forward to that. And anybody wants to join us, please do. It's at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, and you'll find it on the Hudson River Park Trust site. And if you want to just email me directly, I can send that to you as well.
Okay, so if anybody else has anything to say about this, because, we can come back to it. Adam, you could even look at the pattern yourself and maybe suggest some streets at a certain point. And it would be really great, I think, if we could also give whatever is found in these charts, and maybe you can discuss them with the reopening committee too. So thanks so much. I think this has been really enlightening for me. I don't even understand these things, and this is awfully clear. So thanks a million, Adam, for doing this. And Pete is saying, what are you saying now, Pete? Traffic density? Let's see what Pete is saying. It must be considered when you look at any possible recommendations. Right. Well, unless you think about using the open street and not think about traffic density, and maybe think that you can change it altogether. I don't know. Whatever the case, we don't have to think about it now, but we do have to go into business session. So I think what we have to do in business session is talk about the DOT proposal. So first I want to harken back to our original resolution, which have all of you had a chance to look back? Our May 2019 resolution? Yeah, okay. Because at that time we were dealing with University Place, and already University Place between 14th and 13th had been reversed. So this had to do with making it a shared street. And I don't think anybody was against making University a shared street. And, Janet is the maven on the shared street. Janet, do you want to just give us a little brief description of a shared street?
Well, a shared street is accessible to all road users, and the car is perceived like what we have now as shared streets. The car is a visitor and is supposed to move slowly. So the one piece of shared street on 13th and 14th, has room for pickups, drop-offs, local traffic.
Right, okay, and I will say, here's our whereas, which said, shared streets are set up to be used equitably and harmoniously by pedestrians, bicyclists, and motor vehicles, with priority for pedestrians through design, regulations, and signage that slow traffic and create a calm and safe environment. So up to now, we've got one shared street. It's just really between 14th and 13th, and that's it. And so I guess the question is, what is your opinion? Do we want to ask again for a full shared street all the way down to Washington Square?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, do we want to ask to go back to a north direction rather than a south direction? Otherwise, do we want to actually try this recommendation of extending the shared street and the reverse street 1 block further. I mean, I have opinions, but I want everybody else's opinion.
I feel as if DOT needs to make this presentation again and come back with more data. I am on University Place 3 or 4 times a day. There is, because it's now a dead end, it has basically been a decommissioned street and there is very little vehicular traffic. So my hunch is were they to reverse this, it would have a little bit of improvement on 13th and virtually no impact on 12th, but they did not present the case. They did not have the counts of how many cars are coming north versus coming south. They didn't bring us the data before and after 13th to 14th was closed. So in deference to our neighbors, you know, that would be my position on this piece. I mean, I do like, I feel like the cyclists do need an extra block to come down to get to 12th Street. I mean, personally, I'm predisposed, but I don't think they made a good case.
I mean, if I could pipe in here, I agree with Janet. It seemed to me to be answering a problem, you know, an answer searching for a problem. And without a lot of hard data and not a lot of logic behind, well, this, you know, these are the conditions A, B, and C. These are the alternatives that we considered. And this is why this was the best solution. It just seemed that we created a problem by having a chokehold at 13th and University Place. So we're now trying to fix that by extending it 1 block, but they're not looking at the whole area in its entirety. They're trying to fix one problem, potentially creating another or additional problems.
Except there's not really a chokehold at 13th and University. The problem is 13th and 5th.
And also 13th and 4th. I mean, there are different flow issues. And my question is, you know, what other alternatives could they do to safeguard pedestrian traffic at Broadway, keep flowing traffic on 14th for the buses without having to cause so much disruption, given the, you know, incredibly dynamic situation caused by COVID.
Anybody else?
Just one other thing I think we do need to highlight is 12th Street does have a huge problem on that 1 block with the police placards. You know, I know they're trying to address that, but good for us to mention that again.
Okay, I mean, that's a simple one. That's to say the condition on 12th Street and then to investigate and have some solutions for handling those placards and reducing that congestion, I guess. Might be a better way to ask for it.
One of the other things that came up consistently was there's no southbound traffic, and why can't you take a right on Broadway?
Right.
Right.
Not a right on
That really wasn't answered
No.
for me.
Right. So, no southbound. See, because it sounded, it's like what you just said, Ritu and Janet, was that almost the problem was created because they wanted to clear out the street to allow cars to turn and evacuate the busway. So that was why they did this originally for this 1 block on University, 1 block on 13th Street. But then that created tremendous congestion and backup on 13th. So now their solution is to say, well, yeah, because obviously the traffic went no place, it just went in circles. If you wanted to head east, you had no alternative if you were already on University. So now they want to give you a way to head east on 12th. But is that the solution? I'm not quite sure exactly how we word this thing. And then obviously you do have two completely southbound streets. You've got Broadway and Fifth Avenue. And so we might want to be asking, right, for there to be that right hand turn on Broadway. I mean, do we ask them to look into that, do you think? What do you think?
But if university, because university used to be two ways, if it suddenly only goes north, then it has to, that traffic has to go into the busway too. So
right.
I don't think that that one piece of reverse street is such an issue. I think we need to know how many cars actually take that right for, like, that's why I say the data, we just don't, they need to be more granular about it and let us know what's happening. Because if there's so few cars, one of the gentlemen said he lived there and he never sees a car. There's one person who said that. I live there, I never see a car on it. So those cars are not turning right on University and Broadway, then everybody must be headed to Fourth Avenue.
Okay, I started the whole idea in my mind was what we originally asked for in our May 2019 resolution, which was to make it a shared street all the way down south to the park, and then eventually to turn it into a greenway. And the interesting thing was there were several people tonight that were asking for that. I don't know what the feasibility is. I don't know that, you know, DOT would have to study it. Is this something we want to reiterate, besides also asking them to study? We need input here.
Can't hurt. I don't know, should we raise our hands if we think we agree with you?
I don't think everybody, does people agree? Just raise your hand in the picture if you agree to that.
Restate it, Shirley.
Study it fully south. Fully south. And first shared, and then eventually a greenway. Do I have enough yays on that?
Yes.
Oh, can you all raise your hands again? Dan, I can't see you. Do you agree? Where are you?
Yeah, he raised his hand.
I agree. I've got my hand raised in the chat.
Okay, how about you, Anthony? I can't see you either.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And Joe Flayhaven? Oh, you know, we sometimes have problems with Joe here. And okay.
Yeah, but if it's fully shared.
Well, how about you, Ed? Ed, do you agree to that
Yes.
approach? Okay,
Yes.
so let's think of this. Lois also, I saw you before. So, okay, everybody unanimously agrees. But now, okay, let's go over what we're going to say. We're going to say basically, and I'm just going to write. Sorry? I can't hear.
There's an echo, Shirley.
Oh, is that me?
Yeah.
Clever. Anyhow, what I'm going to do is I will write a draft which talks about what Janet spoke about. And Janet, I'd appreciate if you would email me right away all your thoughts about where there should be data collection, where there wasn't data.
Come here, Bubba.
And what, where there are holes. Ritu, could you do the same?
Yes.
Okay, so that will be part of it. And then we will hark back to our May 9th, 2019 request in the first place. And I'll look at the whereases to see what we said then too, that might apply now. And that also, there was a fair amount of input actually asking for that in different ways. Some people asked for a pedestrian zone. Other people asked for an extended shared street, and other people actually asked for an esplanade. Okay, there was, so I can say all those things. There was also something else though that I don't know how you get around it, and maybe I'm really listening too deeply. which was, okay, they were talking about the fruit vendor and how he's moved now and he's been so impolite. Is that something we factor in? Some people complained, by the way, in their correspondence to the board, that he was taken away. You know, he didn't have a place to stay anymore and they had depended on him. I don't know, do all of you know that fruit vendor? It was between 13th and 14th on University, and it sold all kinds of fruit from a truck. Okay, in line with that, deliveries. We would have, this is a street that does receive deliveries, so that they would have to make some kind of provision for deliveries. Okay, what do you do with a closed street in Europe? I mean, hey, I'm trying to, Vienna has several enormous closed streets, and of course the deliveries come in the night. Is that something that we want to suggest?
Well, there's always access for emergency vehicles and deliveries. We could, the overnight, you know, residents don't like that because of the.
I know.
So I just think that there has to be access, limited access for deliveries.
As in any shared street.
Yeah.
As we're doing on open streets, I guess. So, okay, I'm writing, but I have to put that in too, right? Because it is a street that really right now, I mean, there's a supermarket, at least one, there's two. And they certainly get deliveries, and they're essential deliveries. We all eat, we all get food there. And there are several other kinds of establishments there, and they really need to get their deliveries. So maybe in the far future, you talk about a greenway. And so do we include? Think about greenways in the future, right? What do you say?
Yes.
Somebody talk, okay.
Yes.
Future greenway study.
And I think there should be an overall discussion about limiting congestion. And that's what we're trying to work towards. You know, and again, who knows what's going to happen in 2021 when we have a change of mayors. We have been following this course, some of which makes sense in certain areas and may not make sense for our area, in my very humble opinion.
Which course are you talking about?
And that is the busway, number one,
right.
To be so intransigent about that. I understand that they can't allow cabs and buses on 14th Street, for example, but maybe that is what's needed, that diverting the traffic other than buses does not make a lot of sense for big parts of the city. And the other thing is about Vision Zero. What other mitigation efforts to create pedestrian safety is being put in place in that area on Broadway and 14th? So again, there are these unanswered questions, you know, answers in search of a question being implemented with spillover effect into highly residential areas. You know, I mean, one of the questions I'd love to be answered is if you're safeguarding pedestrians at 14th and Broadway, how are you increasing the risk for pedestrians on other cross streets?
Right. Ritu, will you send me that too? I just took a note of it, and I understand exactly what you're talking about. But send me, you know, your verbiage.
Okay.
We'll put it all together. And by the way, speaking of the busway, Janet, I know that you were at that CB5 meeting where they were talking about the 14th Street busway, and I have asked DOT to come and give us an update about the busway, and I think that will give us at least some opportunity. It doesn't, you know, Janet, what was your impression of CB5? I got the impression that it was really not the done deal that de Blasio is saying that it is. It sounded like they were still studying it, they were still monitoring it, at least the part that I saw.
Yeah, they have more community meetings to go through. Nothing is set. Nothing's done. Not, you know, I mean, they want to get it in this before the end of the winter, but I don't know.
Right, okay, so I mean, that's another subject, and I have asked DOT, possibly in October, to be coming to give us an update on the busway, as they did to Community Board 5. I think one of the things I asked them was, how come that came about? How come Community Board 5 got that busway, that update, and we didn't? So it may just be that CB5 asked for it, so now we're asking too. Anything else, gang, that you can think of? I mean, so it's mostly, hey, do your homework more. You really have not done enough data collection. You haven't done enough observation. They certainly got some input from the community tonight. Then also, please consider these other long-term ideas that we had submitted in the first place. And also, look in context, you know, that maybe some of these things that you thought about in the first place, as Ritu said, like turning at every intersection for everybody. Maybe that's not anything that's particularly necessary. Okay, I would think of one more thing, which people brought up, which is that they are talking about data that they collected before COVID-19. So do we ask them to wait until the pandemic's over to do this? Opinions? I mean, how do we handle it?
System. That's why the busway is so important, because for the city to survive, we have to have, you know, our priorities cannot be the car.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, okay. But that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking this particular.
My question would be, what is the long-term impact of COVID going to do for vehicular traffic through our area?
Screw us more. We're going to be screwed if people come back in cars.
Okay, but that's a whole other thing. Right now, all I'm asking is, when do we ask them to study this? It doesn't sound like they're studying anything right now.
No.
You know, Shirley, you raise a good point, because a lot of people have been talking about this. When do you go look at numbers again? You know, when's the right time? And that's across the board, right? And it may not be when the pandemic is over per se, but we're so still in the depths of this right now that.
But having said that though, Carter, that's a really good point. On the other hand, we're seeing, you know, the rollout of indoor dining. We're seeing the rollout of the opening of gyms. We're seeing the rollout of the opening of various businesses now that are taking place piecemeal, but we are going back to a quote unquote, you know, business as usual, maybe not at 100%, maybe it's only at 80%. So why isn't now a good time to start studying?
Actually, it's way lower than that. Business, I mean, the gyms, I think, are what, a third or 20%? I mean, these numbers are really negligible at this point versus the previous activity. And you're right, the city's trying to explore these areas to see what can work. But I'm not sure it's useful, except setting it as a base, you know, of where you see an increase from. I mean, I think right now we're starting to see, you know, to Janet's point, a little bit more traffic transiting through our community that's not necessarily stopping, and you're starting to see that at some of the peak traffic hours. It's difficult to differentiate, you know, are these the same people who are driving on Fridays through Manhattan to go to New Jersey, or, you know, but it's surely just raises a good point of, you know, what, you know, at what point is it normal? I mean,
Well, at what point should they be studying? The other point too is that, are they ready to go on site and study? It seems that they really are not going on site right now. And the only way that you can really study this stuff is to go on site.
They said they spent a lot of time on site, I think
pre-pandemic, pre-March.
Yeah, pre-pandemic.
The more interesting data would be the pre-pandemic data, because that's more like what we will eventually be back at.
Well, we're hoping that we're not back to that, right? We're hoping that maybe there will be a new kind of model that will develop.
I mean, wouldn't we want some of these resources directed more to our larger community and measuring movement throughout the larger portions of our community if, you know, they're spending the time on this, and also with the budgets coming up so we can have a better understanding of some of that? Or is still looking at these smaller projects a priority? Because the reality is the budgets are going to get, you know, impacted pretty significantly. And
that's the other concern.
and I kind of would.
I don't think it should be, frankly, from my point of view, this is what they're concentrating on. That's the way they work. They work peaceful. We like them to do things comprehensively, so that we're trying to get something out of them. But the question is just recommend and don't say, wait. I mean, just leave it alone and just give the recommendations. I mean, we can do that too. But I don't know how constructive that's going to be then.
But poor third.
We do want them to look at stuff now, in a way, right?
Right, well, because 12th and 13th from 4th Avenue to 5th Avenue have a problem now.
Yeah.
I don't know that, you know, how that.
Yeah, but University Place is a discrete area, you know. It's that one little street. And we're kind of talking about the future of university, I guess I'm thinking about. So, you know what, just give me some input. Tell me, this is the only thing I'm asking. I can throw in everything else.
I think the big thing is that we wouldn't necessarily want whatever our recommendation that the 50 people who joined us from a very small area, right, that they'd be surprised. And
sure, yeah.
And I just say that, so I mean, it's, you know, I think Janet was saying there's a huge problem on those streets, right? That's the underlying problem, and anything that contributes to it incenses people beyond belief, even if it's, you know, 3 extra cars that are somehow pushed on there. So I don't know, you know, right? I mean, that's, you know, and it's like the parking, you know, there's going to be some other NYPD unit that moves in there, even though they've gotten rid of the homeless outreach unit now. So it's going to be exacerbated again. And those seem to be the underlying issues. I don't know. I mean, it's
yeah, but I mean, the underlying issue is what Janet was saying and Ritu was saying, is that they really didn't do their homework. They didn't do enough study. They really didn't figure out conditions. But then again, conditions have changed so. But I mean, we could say, as you all suggested, that we do need more in-depth study of conditions. But the point is, when? So thoughts? Or do we just say that? Or maybe, hey, you know, I can do a draft, get it to the whole committee, and you can comment then.
Maybe when we're fresher.
Oh yeah, it's 9:35. Yeah, I think we've said what we can, you know, and I will make an attempt. And Janet and Ritu, you send me your comments. Anybody else that has comments, Cardi, you too. I appreciate your comments because it's a difficult kind of thing. I think it's a difficult kind of thing with any of these kinds of situations where you've got this stale data and you know, not really having an opportunity to collect more that's really relevant right now. Okay, that's it. Anyhow, Adam, thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you, Adam.
We will follow through, maybe, you know, with the reopening committee.
Thank you.
We can talk more about it. And also, Adam, if you do look at it yourself and you find certain glaring streets, maybe we can do something with that data to ask for more study for open streets on that. So I think we're talked out, right?
I have a request for Adam. I think it might be helpful if you could help me figure out how to use the data set. I tried a couple times, but I didn't spend too much time on actually looking at where have there been accidents, where have there been pedestrian accidents, vehicular accidents, and bike accidents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
how that is.
I can send you the Tableau workbook, and if you get the free public Tableau reader, you'll be able to consume that workbook and apply the filters the same way that I was.
Okay.
And that'll probably take all the take most of the hard work out, and then you can just use that to try to identify those patterns.
The big difficulty when I was looking at it is that it was really hard to find a comparison. So although there may have been increased accidents at a particular crossing or street, given the fact that overall vehicular traffic is so much lower now than it was a year ago, it was hard to compare it to a year earlier comparison. It was hard to make that argument that, okay, here are some dangerous crossings and this is where we should be spending our time and energy, or this is where the traffic flow is backing up. Looking at it versus a year ago, that's what, that's when I kind of like lost patience with myself and gave up.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, why don't you and I follow up offline and we can.
Right.
Great.
Yeah, I think we're talked out, huh, everybody? So I'll do my draft. Janet and Ritu and Carter, if you will, please send me whatever your thoughts are. I'll try to integrate them, and then we'll go from there, and we'll shape it and come up with something that at least maybe gives them a direction so that, maybe hopefully they will start getting out.
Is there a way to copy all of the comments in chat? Does anyone know?
I think it downloads automatically when you.
Yeah, Carter can send it to you.
Can you send it to us, Carter? That would be great.
Or Valerie, you have it, or you want to? Yeah, I'll send it to you. It's fine.
Thank you. That would be very
Carter
kind.
will send the chat.
I think if you're using a desktop version of Zoom, I think it saves it automatically for everybody. But I'll send it to you guys.
Okay.
That would be good. Okay, well, listen, thank you all for your patience, for your input. Adam, thanks for the it really was a great presentation. I mean, I'm a total pinhead.
Thank you.
And now I understand a little better. So anyhow, have a nice weekend. I don't know, you all doing something special on Labor Day? Hope so. And see you soon. And I will be getting
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. All.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Night.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, Shirley. I'll send you some notes as well. Thank you.
Anthony.
Okay, great. Please, all comments as fast as you can. Take care.